just before the hour. So everyone is ready and we can go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Kathy Ho, Deputy Director for Environmental Health. Thank you all for being here today. Nearly a year ago, we learned of an unprecedented and unthinkable disaster. An entire drinking water system was contaminated with jet fuel. Since then, since the time that DOH received its first calls from the Navy water system residents on November 28th, our response has been centered around doing the right thing to protect 93,000 people impacted by the Navy water system and tens of thousands more Oahu residents who rely on our aquifer. I'm extremely proud of how the Department of Health staff continues to work diligently and often under difficult circumstances to shut down Red Hill. As stewards of the health of the people and environment of Hawaii, we remain focused on ensuring defueling and closure takes place quickly and safely as possible, remediating our aquifer and ensuring that Oahu's communities have access to safe drinking water, and working with our federal partners to document health effects. We've come so far in protecting our resources, but there's obviously more work to be done. We want to thank all of you for making your voices heard. The DOH will continue to hold the Department of Defense accountable to ensuring the Red Hill tanks are safely defueled and closed, and that the state will have access to clean, fresh drinking water in the future. We look forward to an informative meeting today, and I'd like to refer our audience to HRS 342L-63 to review, which is at the end of the agenda, to review the FTAC Commission duties. At this time, I would like to introduce the FTAC members. I understand that representatives from Brian Schatz and representatives from Ed Case's office will not be able to participate due to potential conflicts. When I call your names, would you please introduce yourself? Carlos Santana.
Hello, yes, I am online. I am representing Senator Hirono's office.
Thank you. Ikaika Mahoy. Okay, thank you. Rear Admiral Wade. Is he online?
So yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rear Admiral Barnett.
He's here in the building. He just took a call, but he'll be next to me here momentarily.
Great, thank you. Senator Mike Gabbard.
Yes, he's here. He's here. We just are having a little bit of technical difficulty.
Thank you. Representative Nicole Lowen.
Aloha, I'm here listening in.
Thank you. Gabriela Carvalho from US EPA.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Ernie Lau from Board of Water Supply.
Aloha, everybody.
Kaleo Manuel from Seaworm.
Aloha, everyone.
Ryan Imata, Seaworm also.
Good morning.
Community Representative Melanie Lau, Dr. Melanie Lau.
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. And Community Representative Ashley Nishihara.
Present. Aloha. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll go to the next on the agenda. Peter.
Hello, I'm Pete Reich with US EPA Region 9.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Peter Adler, would you guide us through the agenda?
Peter, you need to unmute yourself. Peter, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Okay, I'm gonna proceed. So thank you, everybody, and welcome. This is an important meeting. I'm sorry to have my back to the people in the Capitol Auditorium, but it can't be helped. We have a lot of complexities to this meeting. It's an important meeting, and primarily it's a chance to gain a lot more information and details on the challenges we all face at Red Hill. So I want to try and take a few minutes and set the stage. And this meeting really requires fair facilitation, and I'm part of a team. I brought along a couple other people. Megan Brotherton is on the keyboard. She's handling the Zoom, and she's masterful at this, but we will always anticipate some technical challenges with this many people. My colleague Keith Matson is going to be monitoring the chat later on. He's on the Zoom right now. He'll be monitoring the chat during the public portion of this and looking for the questions that might be coming through the chat. We'll say more about that a little later on. Megan, can you go to the next slide, please? I can't see the slide, so I don't know if they're coming up or not. All right, yeah, our main goal here is clarity. It's really coming away with better information from the Navy, DOH, EPA, and everybody else who's involved in this, and improving our understanding of the evolving Red Hill challenges. They've transformed. They're not the same as they were a year and a half ago. And hopefully we will also better understand at the end of this meeting timelines, what and when to expect and what will occur. Can you go to the next slide, please? So our agenda is basically, this morning is largely a meeting of the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee, who was just introduced by Kathy Ho. We're going to hear some reports and presentations. We're going to have questions and discussion and comments from the committee. Noon, 12:10 roughly, we will take a 30-minute break, let everybody have a bio break, and then we'll have the public participation session in the afternoon. We have people signing up. There will be some folks speaking from here, some people speaking on Zoom, and we're still taking sign-ups. So here's what this meeting looks like by the numbers. We have 18 members of the committee, most of whom are here. We have 17 different people who will be panelists and discussants from the Navy, the Department of Health, the Environmental Protection Agency, Center for Disease Control, and the Defense Health Agency, which is not part of the Navy. It sounds like it is, but it's not. They're separate. So we have a lot going on here. We have more than 100 PowerPoint slides to get through today. So your patience is going to really be required. And some of those are have a lot of complex information on it, but we want those to provide you updates and information. I'm going to ask panel members to truncate wherever they can those presentations. We all know PowerPoint presentations can go on too long and really just turn us away. So I urge you, when you're presenting presentations, committee members, Navy, EPA, DOH, everybody, to go right to the heart of those rather than a lot of other bits and pieces. Please remember that our focus today is on defueling, closure plans, drinking water matters, health matters, and you may have other issues in the public that you're interested in, even by the committee, but please forgive me if I defer some of those till later. Can you go to the next slide, please, Megan? Thank you. Now, this is important. So please use the chat. I got to read this because I want to make sure everybody follows this. Please use the chat for indicating, this is really for the public, for if you have questions or need technical, technical assistance with this. Chat will be visible to everyone, but everyone is on mute until it's their turn to speak. With the committee members, it's a bit easier. We're a smaller group. You can raise your hands and raise the hand on the Zoom indicator. For the public portion, we'll put questions in chat and they may be buried in other comments, and that will be Keith's job to try to do that. So it's always helpful to single out the question that you want for information, elaboration, additional information. That's for the public portion later, and I'll say that again. We're going to alternate taking questions from those in the auditorium, those on Zoom. We're going to use chat for the public period to ask questions. And you have opportunities to submit testimony through chat and also to send testimony in to DOH later today. And we hope you'll do that. We encourage that. So registered attendees will not be able to record their own computers, but video recording the meeting, the chat stream, and the slides will all be available to the public through the Department of Health. Now, could you go to the next slide, please? We've all been to bad meetings. Every one of us, I would guess, has been to some kind of a bad meeting which got hijacked by someone, or someone just spoke and dominated everything. And people who came with a question never got to ask those questions, and they didn't come away with the answers that they were looking for, and they left frustrated. So I'm hoping today that we will really zero in on high quality information exchange. There may be other questions. Please forgive me if I defer those to later in the meeting. So tonight we're going to really stay focused on that informational piece of it and gather good information from the Navy. And Navy, DOH, and EPA, I encourage you to please share everything you can. We recognize sometimes there are legal constraints. So patience is required, civility is required, brevity is required. And reality is required if there's legal information that people can't answer because there's litigation involved. And remember the goal: clarity, improved communication, and fresh insights. That's the measure of this meeting. So with that, let's get moving. And I'm going to turn to Admiral Wade. And you have your team with you, your defueling team. And why don't you introduce your team and make your comments, and then we'll get into it. And I know you have a presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Adler, thank you so much. And to everyone online here and at the State House, thank you so much for allowing me to present today. I am the commander of Joint Task Force Red Hill. We were established on the 30th of September, and my mission is to safely and expeditiously defuel the Red Hill complex. As the Secretary of Defense has said, defueling is the right thing to do for the people of Hawaii, for our community, and for the environment, and also for national security. One thing that will come out in my slides here is that I'm singularly focused on this mission, and this mission will set the conditions for closure. I am committed to work tirelessly on this effort on defueling, but I also understand that everything we do for defueling impacts all other aspects of the Red Hill problem set. So I'm absolutely committed to coordinate, collaborate, and communicate with all other interagency partners, stakeholders, other members of the Department of Defense to get this right. And then lastly, throughout the entire mission, transparency is absolutely critical. In fact, I'll highlight that that's one of the key missions from the Secretary of Defense that he's tasked me. And I will communicate with our elected officials, to the community, and through the media. So if we go to the next slide, I have 4 slides in the presentation. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight what the mission, the end state is from my order. I'll then go through the organizational design of the team. I'll then briefly go over the defueling plan and then give a timeline and then give time back here to answer questions. So this slide is just a cut and paste from the mission that I've been given and the end state from the Secretary of Defense. And there's 2 highlights and takeaways that I'd like for you to come away from this slide. First of all, on the defueling aspect, the technical side, we will be methodical and deliberate. We will act with precision. My goal is not one drop entering into the aquifer. And then on the up and out or the rebuilding trust piece, actions is what counts here. Words, although important, will not rebuild the trust. It's one day, one action at a time, and I'm committed to that. But I'm obligated to listen, and I'm obligated to inform what we're doing and why, where we are with our milestones, tell you where we're doing well, but also where we're not, either in reality or perceived. And that's my commitment to all of you. Next slide, please. So this is our organizational structure. And before I go into it, let me just give you a critical piece to this. The JTF, this task force, was deliberately created by the Secretary of Defense. And the purpose here is to instill new leadership for the most important mission, to remove the threat, the fuel, from above the aquifer. So a change in leadership. Secondly, the organizational structure is informed and responsive to the investigations for the May and November spills. So in other words, we've culled the lessons learned and built that into our design and the functions that we are doing. So getting to the slide, at the very top, the Secretary of Defense. I report to the Secretary of Defense through Commander U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. I'm in the middle there. Directly below me are two general officers, not Navy, Army. The Deputy Commander is an Army Corps of Engineer, a professional engineer, and she will be focused on the technical aspects of the mission, the project management, and working with the functional areas that are listed below. The other general officer will be focused on up and out, the strategic engagement with our interagency partners, with our elected officials, with the community, with the media. And that general is from Hawaii, from the Army National Guard. He just relinquished command of Joint Task Force Gitmo in Cuba and is on his way here. He should be here in the next couple of weeks. If you go up just a little bit, right next to me, the JTF Red Hill, you see the Commander's Oversight Group. This group will advise me on all regulatory and legal matters and coordinates external communication. So you see there's safety, there's public affairs, legislative affairs, community relations. An important piece is ensuring that we have comptroller and audit to account for every penny for this mission. And then of course, the legal. And there's multiple legal components here. There's environmental, there's contractual, there's a whole gambit. So that's critically important. Now, if you continue down, you see a COS, a COS, that's the Chief of Staff, Senior 06, that provides oversight of the key functional directorates, which I'll go into now. Again, informed from the investigations, which implored there has to be clear lines of authority. There has to be oversight, focus on material readiness, accurate procedures, training and building proficiency, and then effective supervision. So you have planning, training, quality assurance, repairs, operations, and then response. I'll then move to the upper left and you see the two regulatory organizations, Department of Health and the EPA. There isn't a dotted line because they are not part of the task force. However, in order to conduct our mission, we must communicate, coordinate with those two regulatory organizations. They hold us to a standard by law, both federal and state. And we've established working procedures at the leadership level and then also at the staff level to get after this important mission. Right below is a defueling information sharing forum. I will give a broad brush overview of this in case you have any questions, but this is under development. What I've done is I've engaged with key members of the community, plus also members who are either government or non-government officials who have expertise in different areas, think environment, military families, renewable energy, water, and ask them to be a part of this information sharing forum to do a couple of things. First of all, to provide regular updates so they can inform their constituents, their groups, their peers. Second is for their opportunity to give and share knowledge, insights, and expertise. Very diverse members of the community. They see the world differently than the military, and I think that adds value to this incredibly important mission. And then lastly, gives me and my team feedback. The last thing that I'll just highlight is that I'm showing you the organizational structure for defueling, but we have established a process to coordinate with all other DoD entities that are involved in the Red Hill problem set to deconflict, to coordinate, and to share information, because that's absolutely critical. And you may have some questions on that, and I'll be happy to discuss at the end. Next slide, please. The defueling plan has been submitted in multiple parts to the Department of Health, first in June and then multiple supplements in September. They're accessible to the public. They're on the Department of Health website. The EPA has also posted them. They're also on my website. There are 5 major phases. First is assessment. Second is planning. Third is initial preparation for defueling, final preparation, and then defueling and relocating the fuel. I'll go into that very briefly, but the first thing I want to just highlight again that we were created on the 30th of September. So we fell in the plan that the Navy developed and submitted to the Department of Health. That plan is still not approved. I've now taken ownership of the coordination with the Department of Health and the EPA as we work to finalize that plan. The first phase assessment is complete. That's the green check mark. Mandated by the emergency order from the state, a third-party engineering firm went through the Red Hill complex to determine what repairs, enhancements, and modifications are required to reduce risk for defueling the facility safely. We are now at the very end of the planning phase and just starting phase 3. Again, the planning is to get the plan approved, and we will conduct iterative planning in partnership with the Department of Health and the EPA to see if we could find ways to move the timeline or reduce the timeline so we could finish defueling earlier. And the next slide, I'll show you what the current timeline is. That phase includes the repairs, but also this iterative planning, but training. And we're going to train hard. And we're going to rehearse so that we are ready to execute this enormous and important mission. The final preparation will be making sure and double check and triple check that we're ready to go and that everything is thumbs up from the EPA and Department of Health. And then phase 5 is the actual defueling. Next slide, please. And this is the defueling schedule as submitted in our last supplement of 28 September. Again, I'd like to emphasize the call out box in the upper right. This is pre-decisional, still awaiting DOH approval. But the line that you see in the bar is 9 November, that's today, coming out of phase 2, which is planning, and moving well into phase 3, which is the initial preparation for defueling. Right now, we should be complete with repairs by January of 2024. Then start defueling February of 24 and complete with defueling by June of 24. Again, I'd like to just repeat that I intend to work in partnership with the Department of Health and the EPA and other stakeholders to reduce the timeline safely but in accordance with federal and state regulations. And the areas that I believe that we can move the timeline left are in area 3, and that's in the repairs. Can we apply new technologies? Can we work things in parallel vice series? Are there things that we can do to move faster? Again, within the proper safety parameters that are established by our regulatory partners. And then in 5, the defueling, that is with a DoD stakeholder, the Defense Logistics Agency. I'm working with them to reduce that timeline. It's currently at 4 months, trying to reduce that even further. Every day that the fuel sits upon the aquifer is a threat to the community and to our environment. And I'm committed to try to make that timeline shorter. So I'll stop here to give more time to answer questions. And once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I look forward to working with all of you while we execute this incredibly important mission. So thank you, and I'm standing by for questions.
Admiral, thank you for that. Before we open it up to the committee for their questions and clarifications, I would like to turn to DOH and Lene Ichinotsubo, who I think also has a presentation on defueling from the Department of Health. So, Lene.
My understanding is the Department of Health will come after the Navy DOD's presentation.
All right, we can take it in that order. That's fine.
Okay.
So the floor is open for questions to the Admiral. And he also, I think, has three captains with him who are ready to answer questions. Captains Pecoraro and Triggs and Stasek, if I remember right. Admiral, am I
Yes, sir.
correct on that?
That's correct. I've got experts here that can answer questions on repairs, on the fuel operations, or response.
Okay, the floor is open. Committee, if you would raise your hands so I can use the raise hand symbol on Zoom, that will help. Questions, committee members? To the Admiral and his defueling team.
There are hands up in the chat or in the panelists.
There are or are not?
Yes, there are.
I can't see them. Oh, there we go. Okay, who's that? That looks like. Oh, Senator Gabbard, go ahead. And then Melanie, Dr. Lau.
Aloha, hello, Mike Hako. Thank you. Admiral Wade, you said the other night on the news, you said that there's no playbook for emptying the 14 Red Hill tanks that have the 104 million gallons of fuel in them. You said we need to move it out safely and not get a drop into the aquifer. So how confident, the fact that this hasn't been done before, how confident are you that you and your team can accomplish this task?
Hey, sir, thank you so much for the question. You're right, there is no playbook. I've requested feedback from industry, and while globally there's been defueling and closure of bulk storage facilities, there hasn't been anything done inside of a mountain. I've also scoured through the Department of Defense and our operations globally in the same thing. So if there was a playbook, I'd have it and we would follow it. But let me just tell you this. My team and I are absolutely committed to reduce risk to the greatest extent possible. I embrace the regulatory functions that the EPA and the Department of Health provides. You know, while the recent unpacking was minor in comparison to the larger defueling effort, you know, 1/100th of it to be specific, with 104 million gallons still sitting in the tanks. But we did it methodically, we did it deliberately, we did it iteratively. The Department of Health and the EPA reviewed our plan, they scrutinized it. They had questions, we answered those questions. They came back with additional questions. We had them come and do site visits to look at the mitigations. They watched our training, our rehearsals. We're going to do the same thing. So I'm confident that if we apply the same approach, that we could reduce risk to the greatest extent possible. And I'll be committed to be as transparent as possible to this forum, to the community, to the media, because this affects all of us. And so you have my word that we're going to give it our all, sir.
Thank you. I hear a follow-up question. I think the rules say that the tanks have to be filled with dirt or inert material, or they can be sealed off. What options are being discussed?
Sir, my mission is to defuel the facility. That question is really for the Navy, who's responsible for closure. So I'll make sure that Admiral Barnett, in fact, he's in the room. He's got that. He's writing it down. He'll be prepared to answer that when it's his turn, sir.
Great. Mahalo.
Thank you, sir.
Melanie and then Ernie, if you would, and you need to unmute or get unmuted. Go ahead, Melanie.
Yes, thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, I
Um,
can hear you.
Thank you, Admiral Wade. Going back to your first slide, one of the things you highlighted was to continue to rebuild trust with the state of Hawaii and the local community of Oahu. And your second slide with your organizational structure, I don't see anything where you do engage with the local community. There's pretty words and to rebuild trust, I think one thing would help is in your organizational chart is to actually put the names of the people in each of those blocks as well as their contact information. It concerns me that the first phase has already happened, the unpacking of the pipes without any public input. I'm not sure who your stakeholders are, so that would also be useful for us to know. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Melanie.
you.
Oh, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, it's okay. No, I appreciate the question and your feedback. So yes, there has not yet been any public engagement. I've been on the record to highlight that I've used the media as the conduit to the public for the first 5 weeks here. You have to understand, this joint task force was established on the 30th of September. I assumed immediate responsibility with the announcement from the Secretary of Defense, built the team while also working very closely and deliberately with the Department of Health and the EPA to get the unpacking plan approved. They are the regulators by federal and state law, and it was critical that we got that mission completed so that we can move on with the other phases to keep on our timeline to reduce the threat from above the aquifer. You're right. The mission does say that rebuilding trust is by communications. If I go to the second slide, I've highlighted the establishment of the defueling information sharing forum. I hope to make the announcement of the names and have the first meeting here in the next 1 to 2 weeks. You will also note that I have a general officer that is specifically dedicated to strategic engagement. That includes the community. Just moving forward, now that unpacking is done, this was a major event to be able to communicate directly to the community. We will have our first town hall meeting the first or second week in December. We're still finalizing the date with the sponsor. I don't want to name that sponsor yet because it's their meeting, so I want them to be able to announce it. I will also be involved in other events that I'm invited to. So I'm absolutely committed. I'm obliged to communicate with the public. It's critically important. Lastly, you mentioned names. So the Secretary of Defense has already named myself and the 2 general officers, General Michelle Link, the engineer, and General Lance Akamura, who's the strategic engagement. We are just about, while I'm not at final operating capability, I have now received my last senior functional lead as of yesterday. So my intent is later this week to publish this organizational chart on our website with the names of the general officers, the chief of staff, and the functional directors and how to communicate with them. So I hear you, and I think that's important for transparency, and you have my word that that'll be here by the end of the week.
As a follow-up,
Yes.
the tone and tenor of it that you wish to accomplish, I must tell you that sounds more like the Navy telling the public what they've decided and what they're going to do, not so much getting input from the public, thinking outside the box, having alternative plans, being involved earlier, just quote, having a seat at the table, unquote, before these things are just revealed to the public via the media. So I'm just campaigning for the fact that you employ us sooner. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go, Ernie Lau.
Sorry. Ma'am, thank you so much for that feedback. And I take that on, and you have my commitment that we will be engaging with the community. So thank you. And I would enjoy getting a chance to meet with you personally and hear more, because this is a journey for all of us together. And the more I hear from you, I think the better that I and my team will be. So thank you for that feedback.
I see Ernie's hand up. I can't see if there are others, but Ernie, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Peter, I think Ashley was before me. So if we could maybe
Let's
take
go to Ashley.
Ashley.
I don't have everybody on the screen. That's my problem. I can't see all the hands that are up.
Yeah, I think Ashley, I'll defer to Ashley and then go after Ashley.
Thank you. You're very kind, Ernie. Ashley, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, Ernie. I appreciate it. Melanie hit like all of my initial, concerns and questions right on the nose. So I think I'll skip to my next my next row of questions, which going into it, I and many in the community believe that waiting until 2024, a full year for defueling the tanks is unacceptable. So most of the time spent seems to be anticipated to be used up in waiting around for specialized custom supplies and materials to arrive. Rear Admiral Wade, why can't the Navy immediately begin extracting fuel from the tanks into tanker trucks or a newly constructed pipe system above the tanks without waiting for the repair of aged pipeline infrastructure to transport fuel to Pearl Harbor?
And thank you very much for the question. There's a lot there, so let me just kind of get through it. So first of all, the Department of Health, or the state, through the Department of Health, the lead state regulator, has issued the emergency order. And so we are complying with that emergency order. That emergency order mandated a third-party engineering firm go through the entire complex from the top to the bottom, the pipelines, the gauges, the structural foundations, the tanks, everything, to then determine where there is risk and then provided an assessment of what actions would need to be taken, either repairs, modifications, or enhancements to reduce risk. The first question I received was, are we going to be successful? And my criteria for success is not one drop. So, we're adhering to the state order. But as I mentioned in my brief, I'm absolutely committed to work with the Department of Health and the EPA to see if we can reduce the timeline and defuel earlier. I have to do that within federal and state laws, and those regulatory agencies have to hold me and the Department of Defense to standard. So we'll work this together in partnership. To your question about other methods, yes, the Navy did review other methods that were considered too high risk. So as an example, they looked at putting in new pipelines or hoses from those tanks down to the pier. And that was viewed too risky and gave too many opportunities for fuel to get into the soil or into the aquifer. Trucks were also looked at. I saw a report as I was doing my turnover here, the estimated number of trucks to go up to the Red Hill complex and then back down would be in like 14,000 trucks. And every time you're loading a truck, that has a chance to get fuel into the environment. So we will continue to look at all options. I'm committed to do that. But right now, the plan that has been submitted, we believe, is the most effective way. And we're going to continue, as we learn more, we'll continue to refine that, and we'll be communicative as we do it. Now, you asked, the last question that you wrote was dealt with supply chain. And so we all have challenges globally with the supply chain right now, but we're working this aggressively, and we're obligated through the state order to provide monthly updates through a project management charts called a Gantt chart of where we are we on plan or off plan? That'll be available to the public, and we're scrutinizing this. And I have my repair director here, Captain Steve Stasek, and he's committed to work this as aggressively as possible to move at speed, but within the right safety parameters. So I hope I've answered all your questions, and I'm standing by if you have any follow-ups.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Rear Admiral Wade. I do have a brief follow-up. I just wanted to echo, what Melanie Lau just said is that, you mentioned that a third-party independent contractor reviewed all of the possible, feasible ways to defuel Red Hill. And I just I have who is that? Who are they, members of the community? Because, I echo her in that, I really would think that public community involvement, because we have a lot of experts in the community who would love to get involved in the planning and toss out ideas for this. And so I wish that the community had been involved at an earlier stage of planning, because it sounds like, the ball is rolling already. And, it sounds a lot like the Navy is telling us, oh, that's how we're going to do it. And that's what we're going to do. And that's it. That's the tone of that,
Okay, well, I really appreciate your feedback, and it's clearly obvious that I've got some work to do in the communication side. And I promise to work this aggressively, and I'd like to meet with you as well. Just to let you know that this third-party contractor that looked at the repairs, we followed federal law on and ethics rules to bid that out, and so we did that. That process is available to the public. That repair list was mandated by the emergency order. It was submitted to the Department of Health, and they're reviewing that. So it's not like we're just saying that we're going to do it. It's been submitted for approval. In fact, last night we received a whole bunch of questions from the EPA and from the Department of Health on that repair list, and we're already starting to answer those questions. So this process is iterative. And again, we will do more engagement with the public. We'll explain more. We've got to explain this really complex problem set in simple terms. And I look forward to working with you, Ms. Lau, to get feedback how I could do it better. So thank you.
Before we move on, Ernie, if you don't mind, I've just become aware that the public chats were disabled during the practice this morning, but they're working to fix it. There's a problem with it. So meanwhile, if people need to communicate around that, you can reach out to 2.perry@doh.hawaii.gov. Her email is also on the agenda. Thank you. Thanks, Stu. Okay, Ernie, apologies.
Yeah, no problem, Peter. Thank you, Admiral. Nice meeting you again. I know we've opened the lines of communication, and I appreciate your openness to this. Just a thought here. I noticed in your org chart you have a comms team that maybe you could develop or you probably have a communications plan or strategy, and that could be made public and to also highlight how you're going to keep the communities involved and informed throughout this process, because I totally agree with you. Not one more drop of fuel spilled from this facility that could get into the aquifer. And I would caution that a drop of fuel spilled in the lower access tunnel could also get into the aquifer. And doesn't mean that the lower access tunnel is impervious to any fuel migrating from the tunnel into the aquifer. We know that's happened. Even if you plug all the cracks and crevices, concrete is porous. It's not a 1/4-inch steel plate liner like in the tanks. But the thing is, communications is extremely important here throughout this whole process. And we're all, like yourself, I'm unable to get a good night's sleep until every drop of fuel is out of this facility. And the sooner the better. I appreciate our discussions, Admiral, that you're looking at ways to shave off that June 2024 timeline. That target in my mind is still too long. So any way you can shave months or maybe half a year off of that process, that'll be great. I think a key component here that's also what the Navy, what you are trying to do under the Joint Task Force is very important. But on the other side, you have the regulators that have to approve your plans, the Department of Health and the EPA. And Kathy, not to pick on the Department of Health or the EPA, but you folks also need to move with light speed. If you don't have the resources necessary to keep pace with what the speed of effort that we need at this time, then please seek those resources. And I know there are some state legislators in the room, and I would just, Senator Gabbard, Representative Lowen, look at providing the Department of Health resources to keep pace with the timeline that we need here to get the fuel out of Red Hill. And that is light speed. So please don't take too long to review and approve these plans. Move quickly. And General, one last thing is I look forward to more information about the information sharing forum. I think you and I have talked and you're looking at how to actively involve the community. The sooner that can get out, I think the better to provide you input from the community. And one thing that right now, I think this FTAC meetings are maybe Peter, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're twice a year.
Correct. That's right.
I think these FTAC meetings need to be maybe quarterly. And it could be used as one way to keep the community informed and engaged. It could be factored into the Admiral's communication strategy here. Just a thought. But thank you, Admiral. I look forward to greater discussions in the future.
Thank you, Ernie. Are there other questions or quick comments from committee members on this topic? We have other topics to take up. Okay, Representative Lowen.
Thank you. Just really quickly wanted to reiterate what Ernie just said, just on behalf of the House and our committee, that we appreciate that you've shaved some time off the timeline, but the aquifer remains in imminent danger as long as the fuel is sitting over it, and any additional time that can be shaved off will help put people's minds further at ease. And I agree, we do need to properly resource the Department of Health to make sure that they can timely do all these approvals, et cetera. But yeah, just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you to both of you. We're completely aligned, and I'm more than willing to participate in the FTAC at a more frequent basis. So I'm standing by.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Admiral. Are there other questions from other committee members? I don't have a screen that shows every hand that goes up, so I'm going to ask you to alert me if you have another question.
I think Peter, Ashley's hand is up again.
Okay, thank you. See, I can't see Ashley.
I'm
Ashley, go
very.
ahead. Please.
Okay. Okay, so okay. This question goes to the DOH. Kathleen Ho, you've stated that the DOH is not part of the joint task force. You guys are the regulators. And I'm just curious, can you please clarify your role as regulators? For example, responsibilities, what you can and can't do. For example, if the Navy asks permission to do something, do they have to wait until you grant them that permission, say yes or no? Can you offer input or hold sway over what the Navy does in its operations or not? So if the Navy violates a rule, can you enforce the consequences in a meaningful way other than slapping fines on them? And the other thing was, is there any way to that you guys intend to engage the community in this entire process?
So our role is regulatory, and we, on December 6th, as you know, we issued the emergency order for a shutdown. We are obligated and bound to enforce that order, which we will do vigorously if it is not adhered to. As to the rules, violation of the rules, as you know, as you may know, we had issued a NOV, and we've issued orders, notices of violations, and we've issued orders to ensure that our rules and laws are adhered to. on behalf of the state of Hawaii to protect public health and the environment. As to the community engagement piece of it, we will be participating in some of the activities that both EPA and the Navy or DoD will be engaged in. So I hope that answers your questions.
Ashley?
Okay.
Anything further?
Just like, you know, when I mentioned community engagement, I meant like, is there any way the community can specifically directly, you know, direct the input to the DOH and then have it actually be listened to and like followed up upon, and you know, like a two-way conversation, a two-way street. And I mean, you know, not these meetings where, you know, it's really one-sided, where I feel like the public is kind of venting its frustrations and you know, disappointments and even ideas, but then it feels like, you know, afterwards everybody just kind of brushes their hands of it and we restart at square one. So that
yeah. So Ashley, we're you know, I'm certainly open to the idea of meeting with you and anyone else. I have met with members of the community to when they want to you know, to discuss things. So I'm certainly open to that. Like Admiral Wade said, I'm happy to meet with you if that's what you would like, and we can discuss it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Are there any other questions from committee members? Again, I don't have full view of the screen, so it's hard for me to tell. If not, why don't we go ahead to Lene, and why don't you, I know you have a presentation as well on defueling issues. So Lene, you're up.
Okay, can you put me on? I think the next agenda item is the defueling plan. I mean, the closure plan, sorry.
My understanding was
that's correct.
we can move on to
Barnett is going
that.
to be presenting.
My understanding was that there was a defueling presentation from DOH as well. Would you like to take that now or later?
We have the Navy slides queued up first.
Okay. It sounds like we're ready to move on to the closure plan then. Is that correct? Kathy, I'm talking.
We're just going to switch out some people real quick and then we'll be ready to go.
Okay, and that'll be Admiral Barnett and Captain Gertzema.
Correct.
Whenever you're ready, sir. Go ahead, Admiral, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you to discuss. This is my first FTAC, and I want you to understand that I realize how important it is for us to come together, as I've heard, talk about these issues as we focus forward. First, I want to start with reinforcing our responsibilities. Our top priorities remain protecting the environment, protecting public health, and also protecting the community. In line with these priorities, we are committed to the safe and expeditious closure of Red Hill. I'm also committed, just like the JTF, to continued engagement with the regulators and the stakeholders throughout this process. As you just heard from Admiral Wade, who's representing the Department of Defense and the Joint Task Force, they made great progress in the Red Hill unpacking. Last week, November the 1st, I submitted the Navy closure plan to the Department of Health and the EPA. Secretary Berger was on island last week, reiterating the Navy and the DoD's commitment to this entire process. As she mentioned, our obligation, our responsibility, and our commitment will not change. It will be consistent. We have dedicated teams focused on many areas, defueling, closure, environment, safety of water, and many more. We will get this right. The closure plan that I submitted on the 1st of November had 4 phases. First 3 will be going to defueling effort. We are also looking for efficiencies, but just like the JTF, never at the cost of safety. And Captain Gertzma, who's sitting to my right, will provide more details on these phases. Many are interested in the beneficial reuse of the Red Hill facility. I assure you there will not be any fuel-related reuse plans after closure. That is our commitment. We will look at alternative uses, and in December, we will provide the Department of Health with a detailed third-party report with a comprehensive assessment of these alternatives. We will then initiate a contract with a third party for a study on the beneficial non-fuel reuses of Red Hill. This study will involve public involvement to identify potential reuses for further study and obtain feedback from the public on the list of potential reuses once identified. The Department of Health will be the final approver of any reuse decision. They will also be the approving authority of the closure alternative. We will work with them closely, make no mistake about that. Another important part of this effort is continued communication with the community and the stakeholders and other groups. I've heard that loud and clear here. We will continue to keep you informed of timeline updates and major milestones via press releases, virtual and online updates, website updates, meetings with stakeholders like this, neighborhood boards, and other public engagement opportunities. 2 other areas that we will address right now are the Red Hill contamination investigation and remediation and drinking water system and remediation. First, our water remains safe to drink. All of our long-term efforts in monitoring, all have been reviewed and approved by the EPA and also the DOH. They show that our water remains safe to drink. Secondly, we will continue to make steps and take steps to protect the aquifer. We're adding monitoring wells and continuing our soil vapor monitoring and studying and tracking what's happening in the aquifer. And we're doing this with our stakeholders, with our regulators. As I said in the start, we're focused on the safe and expeditious closure of Red Hill. A key foundation to the success of this effort is continued close partnership and collaboration with our regulators and our stakeholders. And finally, our top priorities remain protecting the environment, the water, and the community. We will continue working with you on these efforts. We've had a variety of public engagements, and I intend to have more. We've had more than 100 since March, and we're going to continue to reach out to as many folks as we can. Thank you again for your time. I'm glad to be here, and I want to turn it over to Captain Cam Gertzma, Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, Hawaii, to provide you a more detailed brief. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't already know me, I'm Captain Cameron Gertzma, Commanding Officer of Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, NAVFAC, Hawaii. And I'm the Regional Engineer for Admiral Barnett here, Commander Navy Region Hawaii. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today and provide a brief update. You can go to the next slide, please. So these are the topics that I'll be covering this morning. Leading into this afternoon. To echo Admiral Barnett's statements, it has been a very busy time since the last FTAC update, and I appreciate this opportunity to bring those latest updates to you personally. I'd like to begin by updating the committee on the recently submitted Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility closure plan. The closure plan, you can go to the next slide, please. On Tuesday, November 1st, in compliance with the Hawaii Department of Health's emergency order of May 6th, the Navy submitted its Red Hill bulk fuel storage closure plan, facility tank closure plan. The closure plan includes details on how the Navy intends to clean the 20 Red Hill tanks, the 4 surge tanks, and associated valves and piping systems at the Red Hill facility complex. Navy intends to seek DOH approval for the closure in place. That plan was submitted as previously stated as in regards to the closure method. This recommendation will ensure that the tanks cannot be used as previously stated for any fuel or hazardous product storage in the future, and will also allow an option for non-fuel beneficial reuse. The Navy determined closure in place to be the best alternative after a thorough review of an experienced engineering firm that was hired to assist with the analysis analyses considering all impacts primarily to the environment, public health, safety, cost, and speed. To put it simply, the closure in place alternative allows for the best beneficial non-reuse of the tanks while minimizing the environmental health or environment and public health impacts. The Navy intends to contract with a third party to conduct another study on the beneficial non-reuse of Red Hill. This study, as stated, will involve robust public involvement to identify potential reuse for further study and obtain feedback on the list of potential resources and reuses once identified. Because one potential reuse option, alternative energy, has been identified by several stakeholders, the Office of Navy Research plans to have Hawaii Natural Energy Institute at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, conduct a study to determine the potential for Red Hill Underground Storage Tank Facility to be reused as an alternative non-fossil fuel for energy purposes. The results of the study will be included in the larger beneficial reuse study, as well as during those conversations with the community, regulators, public writ large. The Navy will utilize an inclusive, clear, and accountable approach to gather ideas and conduct a thorough review of all inputs before making final recommendations of the beneficial non-fuel reuse to DOH. In addition, next month, in December, the Navy will provide DOH with a detailed independent third-party report, which provides more comprehensive assessment of pros and cons of use alternatives, including an engineering analysis, cost alternatives, and timelines. Cost estimates, excuse me. As you will see on the next slide, phase 1 and phase 2 and 3 of the closure plan will be conducted in parallel with the defueling plan as is being executed at this present time. Phase 4 of the closure plan will start as soon as the defueling plan is complete. The plan currently estimates for phase 4 of the closure plan at approximately 3 years. The Navy will continue to coordinate with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, DOH, to ensure compliance with environmental safeguards and will execute safe and expeditious closure of the Red Hill facility piping system following all applicable state, local, federal regulations. The closure plan was also uploaded onto our public website for access on November 1st, and the web address is at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. Or stay here. I want to go over the 4 phases of the closure plan a little more in detail. Phase 1, you see in orange, started with the submission of the closure plan to DOH for review and approval on November 1st. It will be completed once DOH concurs with the permanent tank closure methods and procedures. Green box, phase 2 is planning for how the tanks can be reused. It's called beneficial non-fuel reuse of tanks. We will work with an independent third party, as previously stated on this, and we'll work with regulators, stakeholders, and the community writ large to make sure we receive their input. Phase 3 in preparation for tank closure. This will involve DOH concurrence on any additional work that might be required by approving the spill prevention plan. At this point, this is where we begin to further along the efforts that have already been made in the facility, efforts that have been done for response, spill response, working with DOH and EPA, as well as continuing to prep the facility in the tunnels and the tanks such that we can actually prepare them for closure. Phase 4 is implementing permanent tank closure, blue box. This includes ventilating and cleaning the 20 large tanks, the 4 surge tanks, and associated valves and piping. This will also include input in place tank security, electricity, and access for long-term maintenance, environmental monitoring. So we're not just only worried about tanks, we're also worried about associated functional systems in the tanks and the safety, security, and the benefit and the reuse for those as well. Working with DOH during this phase, we will render the tanks and pipes unusable for fuel or hazard product storage. That's important for us to reiterate here, is that although we've looked at alternatives, when we look at the most expeditious, the safest, the one that allows community input, cost, the closure in place is the most economical and safest, but at the same time, what it allows us to do
is to we will make certain that we will disconnect and truly close such that they cannot be reused again. Next slide. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this section.
Okay, I believe we have a presentation on from DOH and EPA, but we can hold that if you'd like to take questions. I'm going to defer to Kathy for some guidance on that. Kathy, you want to open up for questions now, or hear a little bit from on the other DOH and EPA oversight?
Well, this is question. If you look at the agenda, we're opening up to questions on Admiral Garnett's oh no, closure plan? No, sorry. So we're doing the defueling and closure. Sorry.
Okay, who? Yeah, who is it? Is this Lene?
Yes, good morning. My name is
Go ahead.
Lene Ichitsubo. I'll be speaking on the DOH oversight with regards to defueling and closure activities for this facility. Next slide, please. So with regards to defueling and closure, our department's regulatory oversight is really found in the UST regulations. With regards to permanent closure, it speaks to the emptying of the tanks, which we also refer to defueling, the cleaning of the tanks, determining final disposition of the tanks, as well as conducting site assessments and remediation as necessary. In addition to our regulatory authority, we had issued an emergency order first in December and again in May of 2022 that provides additional requirements for the defueling and closure activities. And in addition to all of that, we still have the 2015 administrative order on consent. While majority of the requirements in that document no longer applies, given that the facility is closing, it does speak to some site assessment and release response activities. Next slide, please. The emergency order that we issued requires the Navy to submit to the department a phased defueling and closure plan to achieve completion of defueling at the earliest date consistent with safe defueling. The Navy and the Department of Defense has been submitting the submission in sections, and we are reviewing them as in sections as well. Some of the sections identified are unpacking, repairs, quality assurance verification plan, completion of repairs, and defueling. To give you a little bit of example here, with regards to the unpacking activities, after receiving the latest updated revised version of the unpacking plan, the department issued a conditional approval on October 4th of this year. With regards to the list of repairs, we received the latest submission, I believe, October 24th and 27th. The department issued the first set of comments on that list of repairs yesterday. With regards to the quality assurance verification plan, we received the plan on November 1st, and we are working to issue our first comment letter on that sometime today or tomorrow. So we are trying our best to expedite our reviews, and we hope to, by doing so, and by doing it in sections, we're hoping to ensure that the project is kept on schedule or even expedited. Next slide, please. To give you a little bit of a flavor of our DOH oversight, here's a sampling of the activities that we performed as part of our oversight for unpacking. In addition to just reviewing the submitted documents, we attended regular meetings with the owner operator to discuss our submissions, our comments, to make sure that our expectations are clearly understood, to ensure that the revised documents that we receive incorporates what we're looking for. We also participated and observed their spill exercises, and so that we can provide timely comment, direction, on their spill response exercise and plans. Once we feel comfortable with their plans and preparation, we issued a conditional approval on October 4th. And it was a conditional because there was a few other additional items that needed to be done before unpacking could begin. Once performed, the Navy executed their unpacking activity. And during that activity, the department was present to observe. Next slide, please. So this organizational chart for this particular project demonstrates our overall oversight on it. We spoke on defueling and closure at this time. We will get into environmental and drinking water later in the agenda. But the one thing I do want everyone to note is that the oversight for this project is not specific to one regulatory program, such as the underground storage tank program. The department is looking to resources and expertise across the various environmental programs, or even outside of that, to ensure that we have the proper oversight for this project. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lene. Committee, let's open it up for questions unless there's any comments from EPA.
EPA?
Yeah.
Hi, yes, Peter, if it's okay, if you could allow
ahead.
EPA to just do a short presentation, that would be great.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Nicole Mutu. I work for the Environmental Protection Agency. I am the Assistant Director of the Land, Chemicals, and Redevelopment Division in San Francisco. And the Red Hill team, and as Lene just pointed out, we also work across all of our divisions that are involved in this project, and many of them report to me. So I just want to start by saying that EPA has worked closely with DOH to coordinate the oversight of the Navy's work to defuel and close the Red Hill facility. I'm going to go over a little bit of EPA's roles and some of the activities we've undertaken. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, EPA's role here is to ensure that Red Hill is defueled in a manner that's protective of the human health and the environment. A couple of the programs specifically are the Oil Pollution Prevention Program, which requires oil storage facilities to plan for possible spill risks and are prepared to respond to any spill. The underground storage tank is a federal program that is delegated to the state of Hawaii, but we support DOH to fulfill their role in regulating this one-of-a-kind facility. In terms of actions, in the next few slides, I'll provide a little bit more detail around what kind of documents we've been reviewing, what our on-site presence has been, and a little bit on how we have been emphasizing to the Navy that we'd like to see increased public engagement. Next slide, please. So just in terms of the documents that we have reviewed, we have assembled an expert team to review and respond to the numerous Navy deliverables that are coming in. Many of our team members have spent decades of their careers working in fuel facilities and oil spill response fields. As you can see from these bullet points here on the slide, the Navy has submitted a considerable volume of detailed written plans, and our focus for reviewing these documents is to ensure the Navy complies with any existing orders, meets regulatory requirements, demonstrates commitment to the best engineering practices, and is regularly engaging with the public in meaningful ways. And I just did want to circle back to what I've heard about wanting to move things as quickly as possible. And as Lene said, we do participate in weekly meetings, and a lot of that is really to share information as early as possible so that we can respond in timely manner. So we do not want to be delaying the defueling of these tanks. Next slide, please. So in terms of on-site monitoring, inspections, and oversight, the last slide I talked about our document review, but we have also been on the ground to observe the Navy in action. This past winter and spring, we engaged in numerous compliance inspections. As shown on this slide, we did a number of inspections under a variety of programs. EPA staff also attended and observed the unpacking spill response exercise, the pipeline unpacking operations, which concluded last week. And we provided on-site spill prevention and response training to over 100 Joint Base Pearl Harbor HICM personnel. And so each of these events gave EPA an opportunity to evaluate Navy performance and communicate areas for improvement in a timely manner. So I do want to go back a little bit to emphasis on public engagement. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, EPA has urged the Navy to prioritize community engagement during defueling and unpacking, and we will continue to advocate for community engagement during closure as well. And to bolster EPA's work to engage the public in defuel and closure, we have recently hired a full-time environmental justice community engagement coordinator for Red Hill. Her name is Dominique Smith, and she is in the Capitol Auditorium today. She's going to be developing a community engagement strategy and organizing events where the public can learn more about the Red Hill work. So that kind of concludes my slides, but I do want to just, well, actually, okay, let's go to, yeah, we'll continue. Next slide, please. So just as Lene mentioned, there was a request to show our organizational chart. And so here you can see on this chart that it represents a huge number of people from the EPA offices, which indicates the importance and priority that we are putting into the Red Hill work. So you can see that we have 4 divisions that ultimately report to our regional administrator, Martha Guzman, in the areas of what those divisions oversee. So related to environmental work, you can see that Jeff Scott and myself are listed in the senior leadership roles. And then we have, other people listed below that are, on the ground doing the work. And that is true also for unpacking, defuel, as well as drinking water and public involvement. So we really have, this is pretty unprecedented in terms of the number of people we have across our organization working on this project. And let's see if I did want to just point out a couple of upcoming public engagement opportunities that we are planning for. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, Dominique Smith, she is in the auditorium today. Her focus is going to be developing new public engagement opportunities. The first thing we are planning is a webinar series. We're pleased to announce that EPA and DOH will be delivering a series of webinar events to share information about what we are doing to address human health and the environmental impacts resulting from the Red Hill fuel releases. So these are what I've listed on the slide here are a couple of tentative topics and dates, and announcements are going to be going out on our email list. Next slide, please. These are the key contacts related specifically to, the various areas of work that we are conducting. And we can make these slides available so that you can know who to call if you have a question. And then finally, I have one last announcement to make. And I just wanted to say that since at least the beginning of the drinking water emergency at Joint Base Pearl Harbor HICM, EPA has exercised its regulatory and oversight responsibilities in close coordination with the Hawaii Department of Health. EPA has conducted investigations and enforcement follow-up, and I can report that we have reached an agreement in principle with the Navy Defense Logistics Agency on a proposed enforceable agreement that will provide oversight for the safe defueling and closure of Red Hill facility and protection of the Navy's drinking water system on Oahu. We have been working closely with DOH, which has issued its own emergency order, and will continue to work closely with DOH during the implementation of this proposed oversight agreement. We are committed to keeping the community informed, and will be providing the public with notice and an opportunity to comment on this proposed agreement, which will include a public meeting. We anticipate to make the agreement available for comment this month, and that the comment period will extend until early to mid-January 2023. And as I mentioned, we will hold a public meeting during the comment period. And that concludes my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Lene. Thank you, Admiral. And thank you, Captain. So the floor, I think we're going to open the floor for questions from the committee. The floor is open. Remember that I can't always see all the hands, so I may occasionally ask you whose hands are up. So floor is open. Committee.
All righty, my hand is up. This is Ashley.
Go ahead, Ashley. I can't see you, but please go ahead.
All righty.
There you are.
Really quick. Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you. Note. I just want to say thank you so much, Nicole, for the for the EPA's presentation on that. That was really great that you mentioned somebody. You introduced Dominique. As someone who is willing to engage with the public and expressed an interest in engaging with the public, and that there will be opportunities provided for public input. This not only goes to the EPA, but also the DOH and the Navy. Will you guys be making these slides that you've presented available to the public for viewing? Because that would be really helpful, to view some of the slides. And I think some people are interested in the chat about getting like the contact info afterwards.
This is Peter. I believe all materials on this will be part of the record and be made publicly available.
Okay, cool. All right.
That's my understanding.
Okay. And I do have a question specifically to, is it Admiral or Commander Barnett? Sorry.
That's all right. You can just call me Steve.
Okay, Steve. Okay, thank you, Steve. I and many others in our community have the concern that leaving the tanks in place with or without anything in them, even when they are cleaned out, will still eventually lead to gross contamination of our aquifer through the leaching of chemicals from the tanks themselves. In the Navy's closure plan, there's a table that lists each alternative option for tank closure. And, rather than do the fancy like screen sharing thing, I mean, yeah, just to show everybody what that looks like. Can I please have specific reasons or concerns as to why alternative option number 4, which is removing the steel tank liner and filling the space, would list as critical under environmental impacts, local area impacts, and safety concerns, as well as what you're basing the schedule of 7 years on to implement?
Yes, ma'am. What I'll do is first I'll tell you that there will be a more finite product delivered to the Department of Health in December. This was the initial take by the engineering firm, but alternative 4 is the one that requires the most work. It would, as you stated and showed in the chart, it has the most impact environmentally, potential local area impacts, and just the safety of it. And then, of course, with something of that scope or scale, it would take upwards of 7 years. But we owe the Department of Health a supplement, which will be in December, which will go into a little bit more amplification, if you will, of those items.
Okay, thank you. What is this engineering firm's name? Just out of curiosity, can you share that information with us?
I'm not aware of the name. We can get that information for you.
Oh, thank you. That would be great.
I'll take that for action.
And will you commit to collaborating with our community's experts and revisiting that option, the alternative option number 4, in order to brainstorm potential solutions that could potentially dramatically lessen the danger to our environment, time, personnel involved, and cost?
Ma'am, I would say that that decision would have to flow through the Department of Health. We're just presenting the alternatives. So we're standing by to engage with the Department of the Health, as required on that, ma'am. But I would think that that's your inroad would be through the Department of Health on that, but we're standing by also.
Okay, thank you then. Thank you so much. Then can I shift that question then to the Department of Health, and the committing to collaborating with our community's experts?
So I would have to say that the Navy has to provide to the Department of Health the alternatives. So while they, while they're shifting, I think that in the end, through community engagement, that the Navy and EPA and DOH will tangentially be involved in, that we could, you would be able to voice your opinion in some way.
Okay, so our inroads are through the EPA then, because they actually presented somebody who we can actually like interface with. Is that
right?
True?
I think also though the Navy has also committed to public engagement as well. The Department of Health will be participating in those public engagements. So when it's able to. But I think if you have, I think, yeah, you should provide documentation to all entities if that's of alternatives. And we certainly, the Navy will have to look at it and determine whether those are alternatives that are viable, and then we'll present it to the Department of Health.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because, I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing like a couple of people, Stephen Havlicek and Lynn Moore, Gilmore Ching, to name but a few. I mean, there may be more, but they're saying, oh, I'm an expert in this. I have experience in this, and I've submitted my inquiries, and they haven't been listened to. They haven't been, like replied to. So there's an obvious disconnect between, the public and the, entities involved, the DOH, EPA, and Navy. So yeah, I just wanted to make you guys aware of that.
Sounds like this is an area that's going to need more clarification as you move forward. Ashley, may I go on to the others?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Go ahead, Ernie, and then Melanie. Those are the hands I'm seeing.
Thank you, Peter. And Nicole, congratulations on the impending retirement. We're going to miss you. I was happy to hear about Dominic Smith being appointed or hired to develop a community engagement plan. But like Ashley, to the question, I think the plan, an active participant in the plan development and in the plan implementation should also be the Department of Health. Kathy, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. I don't think DOH can tangentially participate in Navy's efforts to engage with the community or EPA's efforts. I think you need to be actively a player. And all three of you, I think, Admiral Barnett, I appreciate the opening lines of communication with me. But I think actively, there should be one communications plan that engages the entire community, that involves all the key people involved in this Red Hill situation, the regulators, but also the Navy. And before the decisions or approvals of the alternatives, which are the 4 alternatives by the Department of Health, I think the Department of Health needs to actively solicit public input and recommendations before they make a decision. You make a decision, Kathy, respectfully. This is based on very little information, but my concern is alternative 1 sounds like we've been down this road before. If everybody remembers, the tank repair alternatives, it range from continuing to do what they're doing right now, which is inspect and patch the tanks and keep them running, to double walling and completely replacing the steel liners in the tanks. And the Navy's decision was to go with the cheapest, easiest option, which is maintain the status quo and maintaining these tanks. Now we're kind of down that same road now with closure. And the alternative 4 is actually the alternative that I feel most comfortable with, because it completely eliminates the chance of fuel in the future coming back to this facility. If there's a beneficial alternative reuse, non-fuel related reuse that goes on for a while, and at some point in the future, there's a need for fuel storage, then could the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility be resurrected from the dead to come back and repurposed again for fuel storage? If the tank liners are still there, the pipes that can move fuel to and from Pearl Harbor, if everything's still in place, then we're only a 1 degree of freedom from getting back to fuel storage over the aquifer. For myself, the Board of Water Supply's position is we don't want fuel ever to come back to be 100 feet above our aquifer ever again.
We're getting a lot of applause here, but let's continue with the discussion. Ernie, do you have more?
No, it's just my recommendation to the Department of Health is be an active participant in a community engagement strategy, not.
Thank you, Ernie.
Involved.
Thank you, Ernie, for that. And I am committed to participating in public participation. However, as you know, we have many meetings, and maybe what we need to do, and I didn't want to commit, but maybe what we need to do is consolidate some of our meetings so that we can, public participation meetings, so that we can more fully engage with the public. That's the one thing. The second thing, Ernie, as you know, the Department of Health's position is that we would like these tanks to be rendered in such a way so that it could never hold fuel or any other hazardous substances in the future. I've expressed my concerns to our congressional delegation as well. So I'm hopeful that these tanks would be rendered in such a way that they could never again hold hazardous substances, pollutants or contaminants.
Well, we know that fuel, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. We know behind the 1/4-inch steel plate liner on tank 16, I think it was 16, 10 samples were taken out. And about half of the samples indicated fuel behind the liner between the concrete and the liner, the steel liner. So I think removal of the steel plate will expose areas where there could be still fuel trapped behind the liner in the concrete itself, and that could be cleaned up, and then the whole tank could be filled up with concrete to permanently remove this facility from ever storing fuel again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. I want to go ahead to Melanie. Can I ask folks to hold your applause? Hang on, I know you're passionate about this, but I'm going to ask you to hold it. This is the committee's meeting right now. It's the committee's meeting at the moment. So Melanie, please go ahead.
Okay, well, I pretty much just want to echo what Ashley and Ernie were saying. I did have a question to Admiral Barnett. You said you had 100 public engagements. Who did you do the 100 with?
Sorry, ma'am, that was a listing of some neighborhood meetings and other public engagements, whether it was virtual and other options like that. We are going to engage and utilize what Admiral Wade's team has hit on some good items that we're going to also utilize to participate, to get out, to do more public engagements, to get our information out, particularly as it comes to the closure side.
So could you name a few of the neighborhood that you engaged with?
Yes, ma'am. As I look here, Pearl City, Salt Lake, Eva Beach, those were a few that some of my staff has reached out to our community lead and liaison officers. And there's a few others also, ma'am.
Is that with the neighborhood board or with a particular group?
Those are with the neighborhood boards, ma'am.
Okay, because I do attend some of them and I don't remember the closure plan coming up. So I guess I will have
okay.
to look back at the minutes and corroborate this.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, on the closure plan, I was looking at the totality. We're just rolling out the closure plan now, so we will be integrating that into our discussion points. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about in the totality, but being that it just came out in November 1, we're gonna be rolling that out now.
So I guess the other thing at the neighborhood board meetings, it's more, again, the Navy telling us what you are doing, not so much soliciting input from the community. So again, I urge you to start earlier, to engage the community earlier if you really do want to build some rapport again with the community. The other comment I wanted to make was, like Ernie was saying, when the Navy proposed the TUAs, the tank upgrade alternatives in the years past, there was, I think, 5 or 6 models, and the public actually liked the double walled one with the interstitium that would monitor. And then all of a sudden, the next report showed that, oh my God, that would be so expensive, according to Navy plans, Navy evaluation rather. And then, depending on how you weighted the models, in terms of, I'm trying to think, like, is it over the aquifer or not? Difficulty with the neighborhoods, impacting the neighborhoods and inconveniencing residents. So same thing, when you're going to make these models as well, it depends on how you weight each of the variables. It's going to make it look good for a particular one. And I'm just saying, could you involve the community earlier? And also how you decide on weight each variable is also up for discussion, I think, with the community as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I will pull that information. That predates me, but that's a good point, and I'll make sure that I take a look at that as we move forward.
And this one last comment is for Nicole at the EPA. Just like the Navy officers, so do you guys also change. And your slide had the emails for everyone, but did not have phone contacts. And I hate to say this, but a lot of people who are interested in this don't know how to use the email. So it would be nice to have a phone number. And also, since you guys do rotate through, to update the list, in real time, and maybe one website, like you said, or like Ernie said, got all 3 of you on one page where all of us can just contact all of you. And when you change, it's updated immediately, so it's not lost in the shuffle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we do intend to put this on our website, and we can add the phone numbers. And yes, we do need to keep the names updated. Thank you for that.
I want to see if there are other questions or comments from the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee members. Okay, I don't hear any.
Peter?
Yes, go ahead, Ernie.
I just don't want to be so negative about things, but I do want to acknowledge the Department of Health, the EPA, and the Navy. I just recently saw your new and improved Red Hill website, so I appreciate the information. I think what we're going to try to do here, at least at Board of Water Supply, is cross-link from our website, protectoahu.org, to your websites, if you don't mind, so that if somebody visits the BWS website, they can get to the Department of Health's Red Hill website or the Navy's or EPA's website. So thank you for working on improving your websites.
So I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been doing some presenters. I'd like to move ahead with the other part of the agenda. We're a little behind, but we'll take the time that we need. We know themes that are coming up consistently are communication, better communication, and more community engagement and involvement and consultation with them. But are you ready to move on? May we do that? If so, let's go ahead. And this is on contamination investigation and remediation status, and I think it's Captain Gertzema.
Yes, sir. We can go to the next slide, please. So added 3, characterization and recovery. When we talk about the remedial efforts and the recovery efforts and the investigation of the contaminant in the soil and protecting our environment, This is the focus of effort around Adit 3 in the well. Within the Red Hill well itself, the Navy has continued to use skimmers. You can see the skimmers in the lower left-hand corner, as well as absorbent materials to continue recovery efforts of the fuel. To date, we've recovered approximately 250 gallons. This starts all the way back from January to present of petroleum product from within the well at the water's surface. As we continue to see very sporadic indications of contamination on the surface, we've definitely seen a reduction in our collection efforts over time from skimming and absorbent materials from the well source. The surrounding area outside of the tunnel near Adit 3, just outside where the 20 November general release location was, we could just recently completed this past month 2 excavation phases. You'll see that there in the upper left-hand corner, whereby we were able to remove over 400 gallons of fuel from the soil in recovery and properly disposed of. As mentioned in the last FTAC, we completed the planning and execution in June of a second deployment of a remote operated vehicle. So if you look in the lower right-hand corner, we continue to use ROVs to make certain that even as we work with Mr. Lau and BWS and DOH, really understanding any propagation from the 20 spill, as well as anything that might have happened previous as we move down the well tunnel and look for those hot spots that may be identified. To date, what we found is, and if you can go to, let's keep it here. Today what we found when you look at that lower left-hand or right-hand corner, and when you map that with what we're doing up above with the deep soil characterization, we've done 3 deep soil characterizations relative to hotspots as a result of that fuel release and infiltration into the ground. We are in the process. We have all 3 drilled. We're in the process of monitoring those and actually extracting some of the LNAPL. In 2 of them, we've not seen, even though they were hotspots based on soil vapor monitoring, they did not have signs of LNAPL. One of them did, and as we're working through the technological exchange with A&E firms, architectural engineering firms, we're looking at those opportunities to extract, to monitor, then identify, and then apply the best technology that addresses the issue as quickly as possible. You can go to the next slide, please. Since January 29th, the Navy has continued to operate granular activated carbon systems in accordance with interagency approved Red Hill Shaft Recovery and Monitoring Plan. Under the plan, the Navy, through the NEPDES permit discharge, we can release up to 5 million gallons per day, such that we create a capture zone and maintain protecting the aquifer in the locality area that we're concerned with. The GAC continues to be tested in accordance with the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, as I just stated, approved by the Department of Hawaii. What we've seen to date is that as we draw the water out of the Red Hill shaft and we test water before the GAC system, post GAC system, before we discharge into Halava Stream, is that we've not seen any indications of detect in the drinking water. We test the drinking water several times a day for TPH, D, and O. And then we also make certain that twice a week we test for the typical analytes that you would see in a safe drinking water system per the long-term monitoring plan. And as I stated to date, we have not seen any indications where the water exceeds safe drinking water standards. But it's Halava Stream, excuse me. All right. The Navy also has completed 4 plume delineation wells. So as we talk about the GAC system to create the capture zone, also we have 25 wells around Red Hill proper. We're in the process of drilling an additional 20 wells. Those will be both plume wells and sentinel wells. The plume wells will help us characterize any spread of the contaminants if they do choose to spread or allows us to monitor. To date, we've not seen the spreading. What we've seen is the contraction relative to what we had in February. The sentinel wells, equally important. They're just further outside the Red Hill area, closer to other interested communities, Board of Water Supply, and we're in the process of working with both DOH and the Board of Water Supply on the location of those. Next slide, please. So what up?
Are we missing a slide or moving on? Captain? Okay. Why don't we go ahead, and EPA and DOH each have some comments and short presentations, I believe, and then we'll open it up for the committee's questions.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Phoenix Grange from the Department of Health, and I lead the environmental oversight of our groundwater studies. Thank you for that presentation. A couple of comments. With respect to the report that you just made, the water I believe that you were testing is actually, while it's still in the shaft, it is not, and it is that the shaft is not drinking water at this point. So yes, that water has not been having detects, but it is not, this is not testing that was done within the drinking water system. Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. So as you heard from Nicole Motu earlier, we have been both providing oversight of this work for some time. DOH, our primary mechanisms are the existing emergency orders, our multiple state statutes for underground storage tanks, our 128D statute, which has to do with managing spills of contamination to the environment. And we work, we oversee the investigations, but we're also very carefully assessing what's going on in the environment to the best of our abilities. So this involves lots of data analysis. You guys recall at the last FTAC meeting, we presented some of that in terms of some heat maps that showed worst case kind of contamination spread within the system. You'll be seeing some new work that that we have done on that coming up a little bit later in the presentation. And that will be led by Wayne Praskins. So in terms of our actual, so really it still comes down to us understanding what is happening out in the underground in the aquifer where we can't see it. So lots of different efforts along those aspects. It's also very important to us, and ultimately our whole responsibility is to both protect the aquifer from further impacts and to restore reuses of groundwater. Next slide, please. So we just heard again about some of the work that the Navy has been doing. The ongoing soil vapor and groundwater groundwater sampling is very important, as it gives us regular feedback on what's happening in the subsurface. As you heard earlier, there was fuel spilled below the lower access tunnel and outside of Adit 3 as well. In those areas, it's very important to understand what's happening to those fuels. The fact that they have been able to both excavate soil and remove and are starting vapor extraction under the Adit 3 tunnel is helpful. But again, we really don't know the extent of contamination that might be under there and what conditions may cause it to remobilize. So major area of our focus, and we do work very closely with subject matter experts at both of our agencies, and also working with our water trust partners. So the Board of Water Supply, the Commission on Water Resource Management, and the U.S. Geological Survey. So all hands on deck to the extent that we can do so. Okay, next slide. So these are some of the primary questions that we as regulators, and we think also many of the public, are concerned about. So what is the extent of contamination from past releases that's still out in the aquifer, that may be out in the environment, that may be a risk to the future. And what risks do past releases pose? The other question is, what are the options for additional remediation of the previous releases? What is the impact of the past releases on groundwater wells near Red Hill? In other words, as we know, the Board of Water Supply has closed down some of its wells to keep them safe. And so really big part of our work and our work in partnership with them and others is to gather additional data and understand clearly to the best of our ability what's happening out there and have early notice should there be indications of hazards heading towards other water supplies. And then the question we heard also talking about the GAC treatment and the ongoing pumping and treatment. One of the real questions that comes up for our as regulators is how effective is that groundwater pump and treat, that treatment system, the pumping in terms of creating a capture zone. Okay, on to the next slide, please. And these are things we've been talking about for some time with our partners. Again, we're looking very carefully at soil vapor and groundwater contaminant concentrations using a variety of different methods. We'll be showing, Wayne will be showing you one of those methods here shortly. We're also looking very carefully at the laboratory test results to understand what the sources of contamination might be. And analyzing groundwater flow directions, including effectiveness of what the Navy has described before as a capture zone. I think we have some technical disagreements on that front, but continue to work to understand those better and get a better understanding what is happening underground. And then one of the many ways that we understand what's going on is to map the groundwater levels and the extent of groundwater contamination. We also look to work done by others, in particular, Dr. Don Thomas, who is the director of the Active Volcanoes Research Group at the University of Hawaii, has received a grant, independent research grant from the Office of Naval Research to conduct, to better understand what is happening under the ground, under the Red Hill facility, both in terms of groundwater flow, contaminant transport, and also the underground geology. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned before, studying the data is a key aspect of the work that we do. And in this case, I wanted to show you sort of transition from what we were working on last spring at the last FTAC meeting. So those two graphs on the top are the heat maps from the most intensive period of contamination, which was November and December of 2021. And so these maps, as you may recall, use data sets for different periods of time, and then map the highest concentrations and the farthest extent of those results so that we can have an idea of where contamination has moved within the aquifer and where it might move next. What you'll be hearing from Wayne Praskins shortly is another approach to that, using that very same data set. Like looking at things from multiple approaches can be very helpful. And so he will be talking to you about it. Again, a different use that has to do with the frequencies of exceedance of our EALs, so that we can see how frequently those occurrences are occurring and in what area. Right, with that, I will pass off the slideshow to EPA and Wayne Praskins. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Phoenix. I'm Wayne Praskins. I'm the lead for EPA's Red Hill environmental team. And as Phoenix just explained, there are many ways to show the extent of groundwater contamination at Red Hill or really any contaminated site. You can show the maximum concentrations. As Phoenix presented at the May FTAC, you can show an average. You can show one or more snapshots over time, or you can show how the sampling results compare to an action level or standard. So we've used the latter approach to develop the two figures shown in the slide. I might have two more sets of figures that I'll show in just a moment. These figures show the frequency with which the sampling results from the Red Hill groundwater monitoring wells exceed Hawaii's 266 microgram per liter environmental action level, or EAL. The figure on the left uses results from groundwater samples tested for TPH diesel, that is total petroleum hydrocarbons, diesel fraction, which is a good measure of the mix of petroleum compounds in a recent spill of jet fuel. And then the figure on the right shows the presence of TPH oil, which is a measure of the compounds expected to be present in heavier oils or fuels, or could be the result of the weathering of lighter fuels, that is, spilled fuel that's altered by natural processes once it's spilled onto the ground. The TPHO measurements could also reflect the use of surfactants or other materials used to clean up past spills. The color ranges used in the figures are based on the frequency, that is how often the sampling results from each Red Hill groundwater monitoring well exceed the 266 microgram per liter EAL. The well locations are shown as solid circles in the figures. There's about 24 wells shown. The darkest color, the dark orange bullseye that you can see in the figure at the left, represents the area where TPH diesel concentrations are known or estimated to have exceeded the EAL most or all of the time. That is 75 to 100% of the time. Then the medium orange area, the next darkest color that you can see in the TPH diesel figure, represents areas estimated to exceed the EAL more than half the time, between 50 and 75% of the time. And the light orange area present in both figures represents areas estimated to exceed the EAL between 25 and 50% of the time. And then lastly, the yellow or light area shows areas where TPH results either never or seldom exceeded the EAL. The two figures show conditions before the 2021 spills. I want to point out a few things in these figures. One is that there was contamination present in groundwater before the 2021 spills, probably reflecting previous spills in leaks. And then that contamination was present more as TPH diesel than TPH oil. And also that the contamination back before May 2021 was limited mostly to the tank area under or near the tank farm. And there were only occasional detections of TPH in wells further away from the tanks, in the outlying wells. Next slide, please. The next slide shows the significant increase in the extent of groundwater contamination seen after the May spill. Both TPH diesel and TPH oil showed significant increases, with more frequent exceedances in wells further from the tanks as well, shown by the much larger light orange area in both figures. Next slide, please. This third set of figures shows more recent conditions through August of this year. You can see there's still significant contamination in the tank area, shown by the dark orange coloring under and around the tanks. But the frequency with which the EAL is exceeded has decreased in the outlying areas in the wells further from the tanks, suggesting that plume expansion has slowed or stopped. Next slide, please. Here's the same 6 figures I showed in the previous 3 slides, all arranged in a way so you can more easily see the changes over time. Comparing the top row and middle row of figures, you can see the much larger footprint that occurred after the May 2021 spill. And comparing the middle and last row, you can see a decrease again in the frequency with which the EAL was exceeded over the last 6 months or so. Next slide, please. Here is another way to look at the groundwater data. The figure shows the contaminant concentrations, how contaminant concentrations have varied over time under the tanks. At a location, the RHMW02 well, where the highest TPH concentrations have generally been seen. The vertical axis in the figure shows the TPH diesel concentration in micrograms per liter, and the horizontal axis shows the year, starting with the year 2005 and going all the way through 2022. You can see a pattern of ups and downs in the TPH concentration over the 18-year period. First in about 2008, where you can see concentrations rose significantly and then fell over the 2 to 3 years that followed. And then in 2014, you can see another increase associated with the 2014 leaks, where concentrations again rose, and then in that case, declined more gradually over the 4 or 5 years following the spill. And then finally, you can see the effects of the May 2021 spill, where TPH concentrations again doubled or tripled. And you can just start to see a pattern that shows that the concentrations may now be declining. Next slide, please. These figures zoom in on the TPH concentration since May 2021. The figure at left shows the TPH diesel concentrations, just like the previous figure. The figure at right shows the TPH oil concentrations at the same well over the same time period. Both figures show an increasing trend that followed the May 2021 spill, that continued through the middle of this year, and then what looks like a declining trend in the last month or two in the TPHD concentration, and since about June or July in the TPH oil concentration. Next slide, please. All of the data that we use to create those figures should be available to the public, either on the Joint Base website with the URL at the URL listed in the slide, or on the DOH website. And we at EPA, we're also working on developing a web-based mapping application that will allow people to pull up a map of the Red Hill area, click on a well location, and pull up the groundwater sampling results from that well. And we hope to have that application available up on EPA's webpage, either late this year or early next year. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Phoenix to present our closing slide.
Thank you, Wayne. So as we move forward, as our technical teams move forward, we will continue working on our plume status observations, really trying to gather more data. As the Navy had mentioned, the new Sentinel wells that are going in are some of which have already been installed and others which are in progress, will be very important additional lines of evidence. The agencies are also working on an assessment of the aquifer impacts. So through, again, multiple different lines of evidence. And really this work is being undertaken to return the regional water back to beneficial use. We will be presenting and discussing key elements of these evaluations as we move forward and why they're important. And again, help us to better understand and scope what may be happening beneath the surface. There are a number of field investigations. There's some work, as the Navy has already talked about, and with the work going on by Dr. Don Thomas, we'll also be doing in-well testing for things like borescope studies, tracer studies, etc. And we continue to engage very closely with our water partners and their subject matter experts. We need all hands on deck to really understand what's happening out in the environment and be able to both direct the Navy's actions and ensure that we are doing everything possible to restore the aquifer and limit the damage that was caused by these large releases. Thank you.
Wayne and Phoenix and Captain Gertzman, thank you for that. And I think we're ready to open it up to the committee. And again, I can't see everybody's hands, so I'll watch carefully and listen to you if I'm missing someone. So the floor is open. I see Ernie's hand up. Go ahead.
I think Ashley beat me, so I'll let Ashley go ahead first.
Ashley, I'm sorry I can't see you on the screen, or I would have done that. Ashley, go ahead.
Thanks again. Thanks again, Ernie. Okay, so this question originally was going to go to Steve and Captain Gertzma. I'm sorry if I'm mangling your name. But I know that keep pointing at DOH and then point at you guys or EPA. So any relevant parties, can anyone commit to examining bioremediation as a potential way to decontaminate the tanks? I understand that defueling is more immediate of a concern, but it's still worth asking because this will come up down the road. For example, there is micro-remediation, which is an inexpensive process, which involves the planting of mushrooms to soak up specific contaminants in the environment. Certain mushrooms, such as the oyster mushroom, have been known to soak up jet fuel, leading to the restoration of the surrounding environment. And there's also the possibility of using microbes in the tanks to safely and in eco-friendly way to eat up the jet fuel.
Comment, response from any of the committee, from any of the panelists?
I'm going to turn this over to Captain Gertzma so he can answer that.
Yeah, so number one, as we install all those monitoring wells, we can be informed, we can assess, we can respond. As we look at, great question. I like innovative solutions. And I would say that as we look at the future of those tanks, they're going to have to be cleaned regardless. And we'll go through that process, which is really lengthy and expensive, where we clean, inspect, and repair. But I would tell you that all technologies and options, and I think when we engage the community, like you asked earlier, that if that's a possibility in that closure plan, is it the tanks proper? Is it the environment around or some opportunity? I think we should take that into consideration. We're looking at soil vapor extraction. We're looking at air sparaging, natural source zone depletion, natural attenuation. All options are on the table.
Right. Thank you for your response. And I have a couple more, but will the Navy commit to full and complete remediation, which involves cleaning up existing contamination in the soil, perched groundwater, and our aquifer itself, as well as preventing potential future contamination from corroding metal, the breakdown of coating, cleaning solutions, PFAs, and other sources that may slowly leach contaminants into the environment?
Yes, This is Steve, and yes.
Okay, cool. And one quick final question that I saw in the chat, and I'd like to know this as well. How much water has been taken, filtered, and released to date in Halava Stream?
Yeah, a touch over 1 billion gallons has been released into the lava stream. And so when I say a touch over, it's nuanced. You know, we've hovered anywhere from about 4.5 million gallons upwards of 5 million gallons a day. One of the things I'll leave you with is that in the future, as we work with DOH in this coming month and through December, we're looking at working with them on trying to reduce that capture zone such that it would reduce the impact from 5,000 million gallons possibly down to as little as 3. And then we'll look to see if we can even extend it beyond that. We're concerned at making certain that the capture zone, as we actually draw, it's managed, and that is a very fascinating debate amongst the scientists and the engineers. But that's a partnering aspect right now between U of H, ourselves, and industry. Thank you. Okay. So there is no fuel being captured by this filtering and dumping process? I just wanted to clarify. That absolutely not. There is no fuel being captured and dumped in that process.
Okay, thank you.
If I can jump in, this is Phoenix. So what you're talking about in terms of how to reduce that amount, I think the agency concurs with you on that. That really the issue is it, and it kind of goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning about, is there actually a capture zone happening at this point? Is that removing of that water is that having a positive effect or not? What we saw with the November release was, because that release happened very close to the drinking water supply, right to the shaft, there was transport of fuel into there. There is still that possibility that could happen in the future. Navy has, as they mentioned, been able to identify some fuel near to the shaft underground, and are looking at soil vapor, are actually planning soil vapor extraction to be able to remove that fuel. But that remains a continuing concern for us, is we want to make sure that future activities or natural conditions don't end up moving new fuel into the shaft. Pumping it 5 million gallons a day. Now, to protect against that, it does not appear to be something that our subject matter experts thinks is necessary.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, because I was going to ask, is the filtering process protecting the aquifer from spreading the contamination?
Yes, I'm actually going to let Matt take it. Yeah, come on over.
Thanks, Phoenix, and thanks for the question, Ashley. My name is Matt Carano with the Department of Health on the clean water side, helping facilitate and oversee the pumping of the gas. So we just remember initially the spill that occurred in the November timeframe was right over an area that went straight down into the drinking water well, hence the need of the capture zone. The good news, I think, is that, as you just saw through the EPA's presentation and Phoenix's, is that they're seeing the pulse of all of that really diminish, and that's a good trend. And you're also hearing, I think, from Admiral Wade that if they can start to reduce that, if we have the data necessary to demonstrate that we can reduce the amount of, frankly, water wasted while preventing any type of further contamination, then we're all for it. But just like you heard our Deputy Director, Kathleen Ho, always say, it is imperative that the way it's done is done safely, though. While we want to make sure we preserve and maintain and protect the amount of water that we waste, we cannot throw out the baby with the bathwater. We cannot do it in a hasty manner, which then causes more contamination where we start all over again. So I think all the data is suggesting in a good way that we can have this conversation, we can engage the public to talk to the public about it and make sure that the public and the experts that you're saying is out there are aware of it before final decisions are made. But that's kind of the regulatory function we do play. It sounds kind of like we're passive in this, but we have to hear the data come from the discharger. We have to hear the opinions come from the public before us as regulators can evaluate all of those to make the determination that it is safe and in the public interest to start reducing the amount of water from that operation that's wasted. We don't want to continue it any longer than we have to. 1 billion gallons is a big number. It really is. And I drive over it every day and I look at it. So please understand that we are in no desire to continue it, any activity longer than is necessary. But we have to make sure that before we turn it off, we're not going to have any type of secondary impacts that either cause damage to the system, continued or recontamination of the aquifer.
Thank you.
Ashley, may I go on to others or are you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, please let Ernie take the floor. Thank you.
Okay, Ernie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Wayne and Phoenix for the presentation. It's very interesting. Phoenix, I totally agree with you. This situation, which in my mind, it may be one of the worst environmental disasters our state has experienced in its history, is an all hands on deck approach that we all need to move forward. And that's why the Board of Water Supply have decided to utilize our funds, which hopefully someday Admiral Barnett will recover from the Navy, to add to the network of monitor wells or plume delineation wells, P wells, or sentinel wells, whatever they're called, to gather more information about what's traveling and how impacted has the aquifer in other areas outside of Navy property been affected, which has a direct correlation to our ability to turn on our 3 wells that are shut down, if we ever can do that or not. But I would like to throw this on the table here. So the polluter here is the Navy. They created this situation. They're the cause of this problem. But Board of Water Supply have decided, because it's important to find out as quickly as possible what's happening to the aquifer in this region, that we're going to contribute to the effort, even though we're not required by the regulators. So I'd like to ask the question here: can the state of Hawaii and the EPA also step forward to initiate drilling of monitor wells to expand the network of monitor wells in this area, and seek to get the Navy to recover the costs later, but get the wells drilled? All hands on deck. We need to know how the aquifer in this region has been impacted. And the more wells we can drill as quickly as we possibly can, the better the information we'll have to make decisions about what our future is going to be. Even decisions on remediation, what types of biotechnology could be used and is appropriate. We have to define where the plumes are located first. So can the Department of Health, or through the State Water Commission or DLNR, step forward to initiate monitor well drilling to contribute toward this effort? Maybe the EPA can leverage EPA funds toward this effort too, because it's vitally important. We know as soon as possible how the aquifer has been impacted in this area. And just because it seems like the plume is shrinking in the area of the tanks and existing monitor wells, there are no monitor wells or less monitor wells outside of Navy property or Red Hill, and the plume could conceivably be moving out elsewhere. So can the state and the EPA step forward and help in this effort directly, not just analyzing the data?
Let's hear from Kathy and maybe Nicole, if she's still with us, or somebody from EPA.
Thank you for that, Ernie. I wanted to clarify one other thing regarding the water that's going into the shaft, into the Halava stream. We've been asking the Navy for alternative uses so that it is not, so that we can reuse that water. And so we're waiting for a plan. I understand that they're doing a study. We're waiting for a plan for that reuse of that water. The second thing is I believe the Navy is in the process of drilling 20 new wells. Admiral Barnett, maybe you can speak to that, but I believe that's what they're doing. We've been pressing them to drill more Sentinel wells, and I believe they are in the process of getting permits and other things to drill those wells.
Admiral, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, and before I want to say something really quick, and then I think Captain Gertzman has a couple items to put out. But we've Ernie, appreciate your in your statement there. As you know, we are willing to work with you on a broader strategy, and we've talked funding. Don't worry about that. Like I said, the key is sitting down at the table, like we've been doing, having these communications that we've been having, and we're going to commit to having more, so we can come up with a strategy on where we need to put the wells and how we can best help protect the aquifer and protect the water and protect the citizens in the community. So you got my commitment on that. So I hear you. We are willing to work with you on a strategy for the whole area. And then I think Captain's got something to put out here.
Yeah, just for back to Ms. Ho, we have 25 wells in place right now that allow us to monitor what's going on in and around Red Hill. We have 3 in progress. We just completed 4 in the last couple of months. We have 3 more that will be completed in the next 45 days, leveraging 3 separate drilling companies and really maxing out what we have as capacity from what I understand, even on the island. That doesn't mean you can't bring more. It's just that's kind of what we've maxed out right now. One of the things that also becomes an issue, as Ms. Ho mentioned, is that of the 15 we have planned in the future, much to what the Admiral said with BWS and working with DOH and helping us find the right locations to place those, and then helping us through, we'll pay, but it's the landowner pieces, the real estate transaction, it's access, and any help there will make a difference for all of us. Thank you.
I just maybe to thank you, Admiral, and thank you, Captain. We've talked about this, and Department of Health and EPA, should also step forward. Let's lay the map on the table and lay out another grid of 50 or 100 wells as necessary here, and get moving. And also, I appreciate the Water Commission and the Department of Health expediting our well drilling permits, because we want to get moving. And for the sake of our community, time is of the essence here. All hands on deck. Think out of the box. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. I see Melanie's hand too, but I want to go back and see if Nicole from EPA wanted to comment.
Yes, yeah, I do want to comment, but I'm going to turn this over to Gabriella, as she has been leading up an important team that we've been trying to stand up with the water resources agencies. We've been standing this up with Department of Health, and I think it would be a perfect venue for the Navy to be part of the discussions, to talk in particular focused on this issue. So I'm going to turn it over to Gabriella to just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share, I acknowledge that the volume of work that was shared today just around environmental remediation and investigations is a lot to try to understand, and for folks to wrap their heads around. Where are we now and where are we headed? And EPA and DOH have been working to develop a Red Hill Remediation and Restoration Action Plan. The action plan document, it's a collection of all the environmental work that's underway and is to be done to remediate contamination from Red Hill releases and restore the groundwater resource uses. And so the goal of the action plan is to communicate with key stakeholders in the public how remediation of Red Hill contamination will happen over the next several years. So EPA and DOH have convened a roundtable comprised of water protection public trust agencies to help us develop this action plan. The roundtable includes Honolulu Board of Water Supply, the Commission on Water Resource Management, and the U.S. Geological Survey. and as Nicole said, this is an excellent forum where we can lay out all of the plans for monitoring wells, for all of the other work going on, and work through it with these key water protection public trust agencies. Progress on developing this action plan has been stalled over the last couple of months because the Navy hasn't been able to commit to participating. We hope that the Navy will commit to participate. And we've been in discussions with high-level Navy personnel about this, and we're hopeful those discussions will continue. But I just want to share with the public that if the Navy doesn't participate in this process, EPA and DOH will continue to meet with key stakeholders to share information and gather input on regulatory agency decision-making around the site. And we're going to continue to improve public transparency and engagement to help improve information sharing. So I just wanted to provide that update. I know we shared a little bit about this at the last FTAC, and so I wanted to make sure I had a chance to share that news with everyone here.
Thank you, Gabriel. I want to go to Melanie. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Trying to read between the lines here, Admiral Barnett, the wells that you have already drilled, the 15 or 20 that are also planned, are they on Navy property or in the community in general?
Ma'am, a little bit of both, but they're inside and also outside in the community also.
Is there somewhere that the general public can see where they are? Some aerial map or something that you can publish?
Yes, we have a chart. I'll check into seeing what we need to do to get that, and released.
Okay, and then I'm glad you're going to be working with the Board of Water Supply and where they would like to have the wells placed, because we definitely need them outside of Navy property. So regarding the 4.5 million gallons a day of the filtered water, is it my understanding you're telling me that you tested pre and post the GAC filter and you've got zero fuel coming out of it?
That's correct. So we are not having a detect. It is well below any level that's been established, which is the ISP, which is 266 for the incident response.
And you're testing it pre-filter and actually post-filter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the pre-filter has been non-detect for how long?
Since about May.
Okay. So is that your reasoning behind why you want to decrease the capture zone?
I think right, there's a demand that we, as we've heard, we don't want to continue to dump 5 million gallons a day. And so the opportunity, when we responded initially back in December and created the Aquifer Recovery Focus Group, and the experts got together, we wanted to make certain that the capture zone was there. But we couldn't, without any level of confidence, say that we needed it or how long did we need to maintain that. But since we've seen kind of the contraction and we're looking at the water coming out being clean on both sides of the GAC filtration process, we're now working with DOH to try to find out where is that smart engineering scientific play that still protects the environment, maintains that precious resource, and then protects public safety. So
yeah, I think I was going to say, yeah, treading slowly on contracting it is also a good idea. So then that brings up the question is what happened to all the fuel? Where did it all go? The one heat map, sorry, not heat map, but the thing that Wayne from EPA showed, basically was centered around Red Hill monitoring well 02. And I was trying to figure it out looking on the map. It looks like it's between tank 13 and 14. And that's where you made the map, and that's where it showed that it has gone away from there. So, okay, we don't have any new spills between 13 and 14 tank. So what happened to all of the fuel that was spilled earlier?
Well, I'm thinking with regard to that, my response would have been it was recovered. Now, speaking to the amount, that's why we have the monitoring wells in place, and that's why we're doing the deep boil sorings, and that's why we're trying to work with industry to continue to, characterize what we have in and around those tanks so we can actually get after either truth or speculation. And then until we get to truth, the speculation is reality until we can actually prove otherwise. And so I don't know about the history and the past relative to the fact that we have those monitoring wells in place. And you're absolutely correct. Monitoring well number 2 is the one of concern. And when we're working with industry, that's exactly what we're trying to do right now, is to drill those bores, soil borings, and then actually do cutouts and actually extract any of the soil that we may find. And there is, I'll tell you, there is fuel, right, in the ground. We know that, and it's upwards of 4,000 gallons that's been unrecovered, at least from the initial May to November incident. And that's, I mean, in earnest, that's what keeps us up at night, trying to really identify those locations and extract that as fast and as safe as possible. And speed is really good here, because I don't think, I'll leave it at that, but that's really what we're focused on. Yes, ma'am.
So when you say you're working with industry, who are you talking about?
So so it's kind of a multi-pronged, it is large companies, industry that have access to capability off island to bring on. But we ask them at the same time, very important, to leverage the small business and Native Hawaiian organizations that we do have in and around the island. That is a directive, specifically even from me and above me. And then the other one is working with U of H, ONR, and XWIC. Those are 2 Navy organizations off island that have access to another group of very smart organizations and scientists and doctors, if you will, that actually can bring some of that technology to bear, or those ideas that allow us to have an informed conversation.
So what I'm gathering from this is that there's nothing in place now. These are plans you have.
No, so when we go back to remediation, we've extracted soil, right, we've extracted soil that was contaminated. So that's a plan and execution and completed. When we do the skimming and the roving and the absorbent materials, that's 250 gallons. We've done that as well. When we're doing the soil vapor or the deep soil borings, and we have the cutouts, we're actually in the process. We just awarded a contract within the past 30 days for soil vapor extraction and removal of kind of the LNAP, the liquid, the non-aqueous liquid you would find gathered in some of those different strata. So we have a plan moving forward. What I'm saying is we moved out with something. We don't know if that something is the right answer. We just know it's the quickest right now to at least demonstrate a commitment that we're trying to do the right things and build that trust. And then if the other technologies come on, we're going to assess whether that's going to be, a lead or a lag. But that's what we offer, ma'am.
Well, I think in the interest of transparency, which you all keep talking about, it would be helpful to show us exactly where you're pulling soil from, and also the raw data you're getting out of all of that. And also working with Ernie in the state to figure out where the next ones should be done. Again, I'm fearing that all of this is on Navy property. And if you can see, I mean, the fuel has moved somewhere, and where has it gone? It's probably gone past Navy property already. And we need to kind of figure that out. And then on the topic of optics, I mean, I hate to say this, 5 million gallons a day does not look very good to us. Now it's 1 billion gallons total we're talking here, and it's a total waste. We're under, a water restriction mandate here. All of us are voluntarily decreasing our usage. Everything's going brown. The parks are going brown, but hey, Navy Marine Golf Course looks great. I'm not exactly sure how that's happening, since we're not reusing the water that we're dumping into Halava Stream. And yes, I drive over it every day too, and I feel it's such a waste every time I see it. It's been 11 months, guys. You guys haven't come up with a reuse plan. That does not look very good or feel very helpful to us.
Melanie, thank you. If you have other questions, we'll take those. I want to see if there's any other questions from the committee members. I can't see everybody, so I need your help.
I do want an answer to what do you plan to do with the 5 million
Go ahead. And then
gallons a day.
Any other? Go ahead.
Ma'am, this is
Okay.
Admiral Barnett, and we're looking into that right now. As we stated earlier, you know, and we're working with DOH on that, and they understand, but I'm working with the engineers for some type of reuse for that, and we do owe that answer back in at least a way ahead on as we're tracking that.
I guess I'm also thinking that one of the plans put forward here where you were going to decrease the amount of gallons that you were going to look at as a solution, but that's not exactly what I mean too, you know, I mean, anyway. Okay, great. I will look forward to the plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't mean to cut this off. I want to make sure that all committee members, anybody else has a chance to ask a question or make a comment. Are there other committee members who wish to comment?
Okay, I have something really quick.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, thank you, Melanie, for bringing up all those very important points. I just want to mention, because it occurred to me, is anybody over there at the different agencies, that means Navy, DOH, and EPA, is there somebody over there, right, taking down, in the interest of community engagement, if you guys are interested in community engagement, is there anybody over there taking down the names and numbers that people are springing forth to supply you guys, like these experts who are, because I see like people springing forth in the chat saying, I've reached out, I haven't heard anything. Here's my number, here's my name. Is there anybody over there taking that stuff down?
Yes,
Ashley,
from the Navy, we
So
are.
the chat and this event is being recorded, so we will have the information.
Okay, will you reach out to those individuals though, and at least give them a response?
I'm sorry, the questions in the chat, are you asking about the questions in the chat? Or what?
Those individuals, like, you know, reaching out, their names and phone numbers, that please contact me. Are you guys going to respond to them? Is what I'm asking.
Can I jump in here? I think what Ashley is pointing out is people are very helpfully putting their contact information into the chat with the suggestions that they have at the remediation, at monitoring, at, hey, I want to help out, I have all these ideas. And I think what she's trying to drive at is community engagement seems to be a focus here today, and everybody's just sort of volunteering their efforts. And it would be nice that these people were responded to, like, yeah, we'll be part of the group. I forgot, sorry, Ashley, to jump in, but I forgot to ask the roundtable, Gabriella. It does not seem to include any community members. It's the CWRM, Board of Water Supply, and the U.S. Geological Society, and you're waiting for the Navy to respond. But there don't seem to be any local groups or, you know, just plain old folks in your committee.
So we're still in the process of trying to form this group and develop this action plan. And we have been talking about how to best engage the public in all of the work that's going on. So the action plan itself has 4 objectives, and one of them is primarily to engage with the public in the process. And so unfortunately, it's still in draft and not developed, and I can't share it at this point in time, but the intent is to share the plan and to engage in with the public throughout the work that is happening on the site.
I'd like to just, unless there are other questions or comments from the committee, I want to just add a summary. Nicole, are you jumping in?
Yeah, I just have a question about, just to follow up on Ashley's question about the chat. Just is the chat all going to be saved so we can go back to it and pull you know,
Yes.
people's names and numbers? Okay, I just want to
That's
confirm
my That's my understanding. All of this is going to be part of the public record and part of the residual products of this meeting. That includes the PowerPoints and the chat and all the presentations, everything.
Okay, thank you.
So let me say this. You know, there's some persistent themes that have been coming up today. One of those is consultation with the community and figuring out how to engage them for their ideas. There's expertise out there and bringing that in. A second one is stronger coordination between the regulators and the Navy on solution development. And the third piece, and that has, you know, they have different roles, and that's not always easy. And the third one is urgency and moving forward with expeditiously as we can. So we'll come back, we probably will touch back on these themes again before the end of this meeting, and I'm sure we'll hear from the public about that as well. We have one more major piece to talk about, which is drinking water systems and assessment and so on. I want to suggest, we've been going at it for a long time. We started at 9 and it's now 11:40, and we're scheduled to take a longer lunch break, which we will do, but I want to suggest we take a short break, a very short break. I know you are all technically and scientifically informed people, so let's make it like a 7.3-minute break, okay? So come back in 7, stand up, stretch, do whatever you got to do. See you in 7 minutes.
Is this where, is it gonna be like last time? Is this where people come to testify?
No, where do you want
We
them?
only got one mic, so they're gonna be sitting here, they're gonna come up. so
Okay.
next to you. Water. Number 2?
What do you want me to do?
Number 2.
Water.
Keith will run the slides.
Audio.
Audio is on. Can I test?
Test 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Lopez. I am the Hawaii Department of Health Safety. As previously presented, as previously
Hello? Dennis, are you there? So yeah, that's, sorry for the delay. We've had some power failures that are affecting our Zoom connection. So, but I think we're doing a workaround.
Sorry, what? This mic is.
So let's proceed. Folks in the auditorium, we're gonna continue now. So we have Dennis and then I think Barry Pollock to start us out. Dennis, are you ready?
You're
Can
on.
you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yep. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. My name is Dennis Lopez. I am the Hawaii Department of Health Safe Drinking Water Branch Chief, and I will be presenting an update on the drinking water system long-term monitoring stage as 5. Previously presented.
What is that?
Next slide. As previously presented in the last FTAC meeting, water testing to date indicate compliance. Keith, you have my test recording on. Can you mute that?
Okay, Dennis, I was told you wanted to run it via the narrated version, but you do not want to do that, correct?
Yeah, I'll narrate my slides live.
Okay, let me see what I can do to unmute that. I'm sorry, I was not aware of that.
No problem.
If everybody understands that we're doing a workaround through, for the loss of power through our contractor Megan. So we're doing it through Keith's system right now. So sorry for the bungling around, the mumbling around, but it is what it is. Dennis, Keith, you ready?
Just about.
Okay.
We can go to the second slide. We can start from that slide. As previously presented in the last FTAC meeting, stage 5, long-term monitoring. Long-term monitoring provides a framework to engage in continued analytical testing. This includes the drinking water distribution system, homes, support buildings, and congregate areas such as education centers, hospitals, and dental offices. The LTM plan was approved by the Navy, Army, and Hawaii Department of Health as the primacy agency, as well as acknowledged by the EPA. The document was fully executed on July 19, 2022, and is posted on the Hawaii DOH website. Next slide. Water testing to date indicate compliance with the LTM analytical limits. Exceedances has predominantly been found in fixtures within premise plumbing. Remediation response include replacement of the fixtures or to take the fixture out of service. Periods 1 to 3 sampled 5% of the homes and buildings for each monthly period. Approximately 1,630 building and home locations were sampled in the first 3 periods adding to the group being sampled in stage 4, which quickly densified the spatial coverage for each zone. Period 4 is the current and first extended period sampling of 6 months. Approximately 1,122 building and home locations were sampled. Periods 5 to 7 is pending. Next slide. So how do I find my test results? LTM test results up to period 4 are currently available on the Navy Safe Waters website. A link to instructions for navigating to the test data with a home or building address can be found on the Safe Waters homepage. Next slide. What about stage 4 test results? Under stage 4, 10% of the homes and buildings were sampled between January to March 2022 to amend the DOH health advisory. This data is currently located in each removal action report for each zone. These reports can be found in the homepage for each water zone in the Safe Waters webpage. At this time, the Navy is working to make stage 4 data searchable by address, similar to LTM data. Next slide. Under Section 6 of the Drinking Water LTM Plan, the Navy is committed to resolve conditions made under the removal action report. These conditions include tank cleaning. This item is pending with contract in place. Cross-connection control survey. This item is pending with the contract in place. Close inactive underwater interconnections or distribution lines. This item is ongoing. The line between Iroquois Point and Bishop Point has been flushed and tested prior to returning to service. Lead and copper monitoring. This item is ongoing. First round completed, second round pending. Flushing plan. This item is pending with contract in place for hydraulic model upgrades. Water response team operation. This item is completed, transition from rapid response team to public works. Condition of removal action report for zone D2. This action is completed. Officers Club closed at the time of discovery and isolated from the drinking water system through a backflow device. Methyl chloride investigation conducted, premise plumbing flush, and retested negative. Condition of removal action report for zone G1. This item is completed. So TOC cluster at Camp Smith, cross-connection survey conducted, and post-flushing sampling indicate TOC back to background levels. Final slide, please. With the finalization of the drinking water long-term monitoring plan, the agreement is in place committing the Navy and Army water systems to continue testing and monitoring under DOH oversight for the purpose of reassuring the public through lines of evidence that the potable water at their tap is safe to drink. The drinking water LTM plan fulfills all post-advisory requirements, including both the sampling analysis plan and the removal action report requirements, which were documents tied under the DOH health advisory. With said documents no longer needed, the advisory was lifted in its entirety on October 26, 2022. The DOH plans to post a memo on its website soon. It's important to restate that the lifting of the overall DOH health advisory is an administrative act performed only after the surveillance tool that is the long-term monitoring plan was executed and the process properly vetted. At all times since the amendment of the advisory for each of the zone has the water for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam and Aliamano Military Reservation met the water quality parameters and continue to be safe for unrestricted use. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Okay, let me just say that again, thank you for everybody's patience. Megan, our colleague who's running the Zoom, is on the Big Island. They've had a power failure there, so we've done a workaround through Keith Matson's system, and please bear with us on this. So Barry Pollock, I think did you have an add-on? Barry, are you with us? There you are.
Hi, Peter. No, I don't really have an add-on other to say, like Dennis noted, EPA acknowledged the long-term monitoring plan, and we've had regular and meetings with Dennis and his staff in the Safe Drinking Water Branch on all aspects that Dennis went over, and we're there basically if and when any kind of assistance or recommendations are requested from DOH, and take a second look at some of the data and some of the actions which are required. So we continue to work very closely with DOH as the long-term monitoring plan continues for the next until, I believe, March of 2024. So
Great. Barry,
thanks.
thank you for that. So I'm going to go back to Captain Gertzema. I think you were next on drinking water assessment and remediation Navy perspective.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Oh, yeah.
Go to the next slide. I'm really going to just provide a short update. The brief provided by DOH, Dennis, was actually really good and very consistent with what we're seeing. So the good news is that we're following the long-term monitoring plan. We're providing the information appropriately to the regulators, DOH, and actually transacting with them and just collaborating with them to try to get us out of this plan and back into status normal. So we continue to sample our water system, homes, and other facilities in accordance with the long-term monitoring plan. As previously stated, it was developed with regulators, the Army, Department of Navy, and EPA. I believe it's important to note, just a couple of foot stompers, is that, you know, we're monitoring all schools, all CDCs, all health clinics, and dental centers. And so we're looking at those impacted communities and where people operate with a priority. And there is no forsaking relative to a certain percentage. When we talk about the 2-year plan writ large that was just mentioned, by the time we're done, we'll sample over 7,800 individual samples that will be sent back to an several EPA certified laboratories back in mainland. To date, we're about halfway through, and as stated by DOH, we've not had an exceedance. But I think the most important thing to say, if I can reiterate this, because we talked at the very bottom of this slide, is the rapid response team. We still have the rapid response team in place. One of the things that's very important for people to leverage is call that number, reach out to that team if there are indications or concerns with your drinking water, or you just have general questions and we can try to point you in the right direction to get the information you need about your residents. I think we've done a pretty good job in evolution. And Mr. Lau, I appreciate the comment on the website. We now look at it from a drinking water perspective and an environmental impact and trying to continue to evolve. How can we continue to make the communication and the transparency better so that it's almost a one-click stop and shop or finding the requirements or what you're being tested for. So that'll be an evolution. And I know the partnership and trying to cross connect, if you will, with BWS in the future will make a huge difference for the community writ large. The only other thing, if we go to the next slide, we talked about this and one of the ladies asked about where the wells are located. These are where the wells are located and proposed. We'll continue to refine and update this via our website. But what I want to make sure is that as I move through the aquifer recovery, the remediation, the long-term monitoring, whether it's wells, Red Hill, or safe drinking water, what I want to make sure is that the Navy's integrating all these efforts. Direct contamination removal, soil vapor monitoring, creation of a capture zone, groundwater sampling, additional monitoring wells, and where we were from the recovery, from the response, and moving into a status of concern and action. We're still continuing down these efforts and these paths because we're not done. And until we get there, the Navy will not rest, and we'll continue to be transparent to the extent that we can to build the trust and get back to where we were as a Ohana. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
Thank you, Captain. We'll come back for questions. Keith, can you make the screen full screen? Is that possible? We have 2 more presentations. There we go. So Dr. Daniel Nguyen and Ben Gerhardsen are from CDC, from the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry. And I know you have some presentations, and we're going to hold those, and then we're going to go back to our committee for questions. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to wait for the slides to come to the right spot. At least I'm not seeing them on our slide right now.
I think you might have heard, we're on a workaround system right now. We had a power failure. Keith, can you advance the slides? We're looking for the next section, which would be CDC.
Yes, I'm sorry. It is showing on my screen, but it's not showing up there.
Oh, we just
Yeah,
got
can you
it.
put it into presenter mode?
What happens? Okay, there you go. Is that good? Can you see now?
That's it. Well, that was in full presenter mode. I think you want to have it in presentation mode.
It was.
Or alternatively, I can share it.
I'm not having any luck with it, with this deck. I'm sorry.
Is it okay for me to share?
Yes, it is. As soon as, well, are you enabled to be sharing?
Co-host.
Yeah, I think I can do it. You have to unshare your screen though.
Okay.
How's that look?
Got it.
Is that it? Go ahead.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. My name is Ben Gerhardstein, and I'm an environmental health scientist with the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry's Region 9 office. I'm joined today by Dr. Daniel Nguyen, who will be presenting about ATSGR's Red Hill public health activities. I want to start by acknowledging how disruptive and concerning the Red Hill releases and the contamination of the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam water system has been for many community members. We want you to know that ATSGR is committed to working with partner agencies and engaging community members to investigate health concerns and protect public health. ATSGR, for those who are not familiar, is a non-regulatory public health agency based in Atlanta, Georgia. We protect communities from harmful health effects related to exposure to hazardous substances in the environment. ATSGR has a variety of programs that respond to environmental health emergencies, investigate health concerns at contaminated sites, and support our state and local health partners. We have 10 regional offices that provide a national presence and form working relationships with federal, state, local agencies, and affected community members. And I sit in our Region 9 office in San Francisco. In today's presentation, we'll cover ATSGR's 2 work streams related to Red Hill. First, a survey to better understand health symptoms people have experienced after the November 2021 fuel release. And second, public health assessment activities to evaluate exposures and health risks related to Red Hill fuel releases since 2005. In both cases, the Hawaii Department of Health requested ATSGR's support in undertaking this work. With that, I'll hand the mic over to Dr. Nguyen, who will present about our health survey findings and recommendations.
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for having me today. My name is Daniel Nguyen. I'm an environmental epidemiologist and an epidemic intelligence service officer with the CDC, currently assigned to Oahu to work with the Hawaii State Department of Health. Today, I'll be presenting on the purpose, methods, initial findings, and recommendations based on 2 investigations we conducted this year. Next slide. So very little is known about the health effects of exposure to jet fuels like JP5, the jet fuel concern in this incident. According to ATSDR's toxicological profile for JP5, JP8, and Jet A fuels, most of what we do know comes from studies conducted among military personnel exposed to fumes and among those who accidentally ingested kerosene, a fuel oil similar in composition to JP5. These previous studies suggest that exposure to jet fuel may impact the respiratory system, gastrointestinal tract, and nervous system. Commonly reported individual symptoms following accidental kerosene exposure included coughing, difficulty breathing, abdominal pain and vomiting, fatigue, and convulsions. Next slide. From the November 2021 incident, it is estimated that approximately 9,700 civilian and military households were potentially exposed to JP5 in their tap water. There were also several schools and workplaces in the affected area. Next slide. Because of the unprecedented exposure and the potential health impacts, the Hawaii Department of Health recognized the need for a baseline assessment of the population affected by the drinking water contamination and requested investigative assistance from the CDC and ATSDR. The objectives of that first investigation were to assess the impact of jet fuel contaminated drinking water on individuals in the affected areas and provide recommendations on next steps. Next slide. ATSDR provides technical assistance to local authorities in performing epidemiologic assessments after a chemical incident. These assessment of chemical exposure, or ACE investigations, use a toolkit of surveys, consent forms, training materials, and databases that can all be customized for use in a rapid response to chemical incidents, such as that occurring with the Red Hill shaft. The initial ACE survey was conducted earlier this year in January and February of 2022. Adults were eligible to participate if they lived, worked, or went to school in affected areas between November 20th, 2021, which is the contamination incident, and February 10th, 2022, the end period of the initial survey. Parents were asked to complete the survey on behalf of their children. The initial survey was designed to be self-administered by participants online. It asked individuals about tap water usage, health symptoms experienced, and if they sought medical care, and it inquired about the impacts on children and pets. Outreach and survey recruitment involved engaging community partners via email, setting up tables at water distribution centers, door-to-door flyering in affected communities, as well as traditional and social media engagement. For the initial survey, a total of 2,289 eligible participants submitted surveys from an estimated 14% of households in the affected area. 88% of participants were affiliated with the military. Among initial survey participants, 87% reported at least one new or worsening symptom. 93% switched water sources, with 80% of those seeing an improvement in symptoms after switching. This survey also found that 37% of participants sought medical care. Next slide. With these key findings, the initial investigation team recommended ensuring the safety of the water system and building trust in it, conducting a multi-agency hot wash to capture and apply lessons learned from this response to help improve the ongoing and future response efforts, coordinating and communication and action across the agencies using shared communication channels, minimize conflicting information, and ensuring equity in the response across the affected population, providing additional education to local health providers to build knowledge of the event and its health impacts, develop and implement public health strategies to identify and mitigate psychosocial stressors using ATSDR's Community Stress Resource Center. And lastly, the team recommended a 6-month follow-up ACE investigation to understand any long-term impacts. In response to the final recommendation from the initial ACE investigation, the Department of Health formally requested the follow-up investigation this summer. This second follow-up investigation completed its survey in September of 2022. Participant eligibility for the survey was similar to the initial, with a change in eligibility timeline from November 20th, 2021 to March 18th, 2022, which is when Department of Health amended the water advisory for the last remaining zone. The follow-up survey built upon the initial survey with additional objectives to describe mental and physical health, identify pregnancy and birth outcomes, and ascertain persistent health symptoms among Navy water system users. This survey allowed another opportunity for those affected by the incident to document their experiences and concerns. We directly emailed and recruited from those who participated in the initial survey, along with outreach strategies similar to the initial investigation, including canvassing affected neighborhoods and community gathering spots, and using traditional and social media. For the follow-up survey, 986 eligible participants submitted surveys. This represents an estimated 8% of households that were affected during the incident. 61% of participants had also participated in the initial investigation. Similar to the initial survey, 90% of participants were affiliated with the military. Our first set of findings pertain to water safety, quality, and use. Only 7% of participants reported being very concerned about the safety of their tap water before the incident. In contrast, 46% reported being very concerned about the safety of their tap water in the 30 days before they completed the survey. Here are some representative responses to the water-related qualitative questions on the survey. When asked, "Do you think the water is safe now?" 76% said they did not think the water is currently safe. Participants said things like, absolutely not, please bring back water distribution, not particularly for consumption, pets included, and no, I truly believe there are still issues with the water. Many participants reported worse health after the incident. 41% reported worsening of a pre-existing condition. 31% reported receiving a new diagnosis from a healthcare provider since the incident. Of those reporting a new diagnosis, 25% had no pre-existing conditions prior to the incident. 55% of participants reported worse physical health after the incident compared to before. 50% reported worse mental health. 21% were kept from usual activities such as self-care, work, school, or recreation for 14 or more of the past 30 days due to poor health. To summarize our key findings from the follow-up survey, 80% reported symptoms in the past 30 days, and 65% expressing high confidence that symptoms were related to the incident. 46% of participants reported being very concerned about their tap water. 29% reported smelling or tasting petroleum or seeing a sheen in the past 30 days. With regards to mental health, 57% of participants reported thinking about the incident every day. 40% reported anxiety in the past 30 days of survey completion. 47 participants reported a pregnancy since the incident, with 72% reporting complication. Please note that because of the small numbers of reporting pregnancy, we are limited to making conclusions on pregnancy outcomes given this data. Further analyses are planned to investigate how these numbers correspond on a larger population scale. These results have also been made available on fact sheets that have been posted to the DOH website. We're honored to use this data to generate recommendations for state and military leadership and appreciate their continuing efforts to address these recommendations. To start, in order to address ongoing concerns about water safety, we strongly recommended a multi-pronged strategy to rebuild confidence in the drinking water system. This should include regular drinking water monitoring at residences and businesses on the water system. Features of this can include sampling by an independent, trusted third party, as well as on-demand testing for residents, even when the sampling quota is met. Respondents also expressed a strong desire for greater transparency with regard to the testing and monitoring process. Sampling plans and results should be accessible and understandable to the public. We recommended uploading these regularly to a consistent web-based location and using plain language in interpreting the results. Next slide. To restore faith in agencies involved in past and future responses, we recommended the creation of multi-agency work groups that collaborate in planning and debriefing. Agencies should establish joint emergency preparedness plans for drinking water contamination and other disaster scenarios. Multi-agency work groups should facilitate exercises or mock drills to identify strengths of each agency partner and plan for coordinated responses. Planning should also include the development of protocols for rapid environmental and biological sampling. Communication strategies must create and deliver consistent messaging from leadership across involved agencies, along with equitable resource management to facilitate dissemination of critical services and supplies to both military and civilian communities. A multi-agency work group should also hotwash or debrief the response to the November 2021 contamination event. Sharing key takeaways with the public can demonstrate an ongoing commitment of participating agencies to community health and help reestablish them as reliable partners. Next slide. We recommended that there be assistance provided to clinicians in both registering or identifying and tracking patients who have experienced petroleum exposure and in supporting this community with associated health impacts. This should also include educating providers on how to recognize signs and symptoms of petroleum exposure. Frontline clinicians should be made aware of the interplay between stress and physical health. Additionally, state and military leadership should support the development of mental health and trauma support and encourage referral to these services. Next slide. State and military leadership can also directly support affected communities. It is important for leadership to continue to acknowledge the impact of this incident and ongoing disruptions to daily life. We see in our data concerns with water quality continuing to impact water use, cause financial strain, and change social patterns. Several respondents described the burden of water-related trauma and impacts to mental health. To capture and address ongoing associations of the incident with impacts on both physical and mental health, we should continue to facilitate support systems and symptom reporting hotlines accessible to both those living locally and those who have moved away. Next slide. Finally, it is key that we continue to investigate the health impacts of this unprecedented exposure. We recommended conducting a medical records review for exposed individuals. This should include using and strengthening syndromic surveillance systems with tracking of key symptoms and ICD codes associated with petroleum exposure. This should also include review of birth certificates to better understand peri-pregnancy outcomes, as pregnant people and infants represent vulnerable populations for whom our small samples limit our data interpretation. As part of comprehensive records reconciliation, we also recommended linking medical records to exposed individuals recorded indoors, the Defense Occupational and Environmental Health Readiness System. This is a Defense Health Agency system used to track environmental exposures. Following individuals longitudinally will be key in monitoring ongoing and long-term health effects in affected individuals. In addition to enrollment indoors, the DoD should support the development of a third-party managed registry of exposed individuals. Associated environmental impacts can continue to be assessed through participation and provision of environmental sampling data for ATSDR public health assessment activities. With that, I'd like to hand it back to Ben.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi again, everyone. Again, I'm Ben Gerhardstein with ATSDR's Region 9 office. I'm going to give a brief overview of ATSDR's second project at Red Hill, the public health assessment activities. As Dan described, through the ACE Health Survey, we have learned a lot about health symptoms that community members experienced after the November 2021 water system contamination. Survey participants and other community members have also expressed concerns about when exposures began and the possibility of longer-term exposures and health risks. So the Hawaii Department of Health requested ATSDR public health assessment activities to help address these concerns. And we're just starting this work now. ATSDR will evaluate existing environmental and health data on releases from the Red Hill facility since 2005. So we'll gather the environmental data that's been collected by the Navy and other agencies. We'll evaluate those data along with health symptom data, like the ACE survey results, to determine whether and how exposures could harm people's health. We'll also be pointing out data gaps that limit our ability to draw health conclusions. And importantly, we'll make recommendations to protect public health. ATSDR conducted a public health assessment for the Pearl Harbor Naval Complex Superfund site in 2005. That assessment touched on Red Hill, so we're focusing Red Hill public health assessment activities on 2005 to present. I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about ATSDR's public health assessment process. Our goal is to protect the health of communities with environmental contamination concerns. And to do that, our investigations focus on three primary questions. First, are there harmful chemicals in the environment? Second, could those chemicals get into people's bodies? And third, could the amount of chemicals in people's bodies harm their health? That final question is the trickiest. And to answer it, we need to know how much of a chemical got into people's bodies. We also need to know whether the chemical can harm people's health at that level. So to investigate those questions in a public health assessment, ATSDR starts by gathering information about the site and exposure concern. We usually use environmental sampling data that other agencies collect. We also talk with people in the community to learn about their experience and their health concerns. And this helps us understand all the ways that people could be exposed to contaminants. With this information, we can answer the first question, are there harmful chemicals in the environment? And begin to answer the second question, could the chemicals get into people's bodies? The next step in the public health assessment process is a scientific evaluation, of the data. We use the science of risk assessment to determine whether exposures in the past, present, or future could harm the health of community members. In situations like Red Hill, where exposures caused health problems, ATSDR can evaluate information on health conditions in the community. This scientific evaluation is when ATSDR tries to answer that difficult question, could the amount of chemicals in people's bodies harm their health? Finally, based on the evaluation, we make conclusions about whether exposures could harm people's health. And we make recommendations to protect the health of the community. These recommendations can be for regulatory agencies, community members, local groups, physicians, and health agencies. But sometimes we don't have enough information to know whether there is a health risk. So we recommend collecting more data. This public health assessment process can take years from initiation to the release of a final report. And that time is needed to connect with community members and organizations, gather and evaluate environmental data, write a report, and prepare to present that report to the community and partners. I want to emphasize that throughout this process, ATSDR is committed to engaging current and former residents and community organizations to understand their experiences and concerns. We plan to participate in other community meetings like this, talk with organizations and leaders and residents, and respond to questions that community members have. We'll work to keep community members up to date on our progress. If you want to receive email updates about this activity, you can email my colleague Jamie Raymond at JRayman@cdc.gov. As I mentioned, we are early in the public health assessment process. We received this request from the Hawaii Department of Health in July, and since then we've assembled a team with project management, environmental health science, and community engagement expertise. We've also refined the scope of the assessment with input from the Hawaii Department of Health. We've begun the process of collecting the available data, including by asking the Navy for all the environmental sampling data that they have, and we appreciate the opportunity to share information with the FTAC today, and will continue to do so with other groups and organizations as we move forward. Finally, I want to note that as EPA indicated in their presentation earlier, early next year, we plan to present more detailed results from the health survey and an update on our public health assessment activities during an EPA-hosted webinar. So stay tuned for more information about EPA's Red Hill webinar series. We look forward to your questions.
Peter, you need to unmute.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Good. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks for that. So we have one more presentation from Dr. Jennifer Espiritu. She's with the Defense Health Agency, which is not part of the Navy, different, and she can explain that. And then after her presentation, we'll open it up back to the committee for questions and comments. And after that, we will take a break, a legit break, so everybody can either have a bio break or take lunch or do whatever you need to do for a little while. So more on that later. Dr. Espiritu.
Thank you very much. Aloha, I'm Dr. Jennifer Espiritu. I'm the Chief of Public Health at Tripler Army Medical Center and interim DHA Region Indo-Pacific Public Health Subject Matter Expert. Prior to my employment at Tripler, I was a consultant at the Hawaii Department of Health, and before that, I was a CDC disease detective, and I still collaborate closely with my colleagues from those institutions. My family and I live in a local community, and my children attend a Honolulu school, which was affected by the water incident. Next slide, please.
We don't have the slides up. We will get those.
Sorry.
Keith, are you able? I
Yes.
think he has to change hosts.
Sorry, I got a comment that you can't hear me. Am I more clear now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you very much. So as previously stated, the Defense Health Agency is not part of the Navy. The Defense Health Agency it was established to deliver the healthcare benefit. And specifically, the Defense Healthcare Agency Region Indo-Pacific was established about 6 weeks ago. This region oversees the healthcare delivery for beneficiaries currently enrolled in MTFs from Hawaii across to Guam, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. This gives us authority, direction, and control over about 45 medical facilities. We provide healthcare to Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force service members, as well as their families and military retirees like myself. by establishing DHA Region Indo-Pacific, or DHAR-IP. DHA and military service branches can tailor healthcare delivery and medical readiness to the needs of an increasingly critical strategic location while enhancing joint military medical operations in support of the combatant commander. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've talked about our registry previously. We have the responsibility for managing a registry. And at the moment, we have 3 courses of action which are being considered. One is to maintain the DOORS incident report, and we've talked about that previously. DOORS is the Defense Occupational Environmental Health Registry System, which links occupational exposures to what's essentially a roster. So it tells us who was there when there was a specific exposure. Our second course of action is to build a registry into this the system, into DOORS. A registry is a longer lasting database which tracks where people are as well as where they're exposed. Our third COA, or course of action, is to establish a third-party registry. This option offers the ability to include non-DoD affiliated individuals and is better at building trust within the community. Next slide, please. I'd like to talk about the Joint Health Service Working Group. DHRIP assumed the responsibility for the Joint Health Service Working Group this week. This provides a single unified forum for water-related health concerns. Our participants include those across the interagency. This includes ourselves, DHRIP, the Hawaii Market, which is all of the medical treatment facilities, the military medical treatment facilities on Oahu, as well as our public health representatives. Within DoD, there's a combatant commander with representatives from the U.S. Indo-PACOM J07 shop, service components, and medical readiness commands. Dr. Felton, who's a state toxicologist, participates. We have representatives from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and we have other federal, state, and local agencies. Next slide, please. And then there's our Ohana outreach. In conjunction with the Hawaii Market, we're developing plans for a clinic dedicated to medical concerns related to potential exposures. This will give ready access to care, rapid consultation with board-certified physicians, including myself, full spectrum specialty consultation, a convenient location. At this point, we're projecting it to be at Navy Medical Readiness and Training Center, Pearl Harbor, also known as Makalapa, and a 24/7 dedicated call line. In this way, we'll be able to provide the care you need when you need it. Next slide, please. And that is the end of my discussion. I'm happy to take any questions, or we can take questions as a panel. Thank you.
Peter, you're on mute again.
There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Ernie. So let's open it up to the committee for your questions and your comments. And again, once we're done with this section, we're going to take a break. And then in the afternoon, we'll do the public participation and hear from the public. We've had several hundred people listening all morning. So go ahead, the floor is open. Raise your hand. I only see Ernie, but Ernie, go ahead, unless somebody else is ahead of you, which I can't see. You're on mute.
It's my turn to be on mute.
That's right.
So I can see Senator Mike Gabbard, Representative Nicole Lowen, Melanie Lau, and Ashley, and I can go last. Okay.
Okay. Senator Gabbard, go ahead. If you were first, and then Representative Lowen.
Actually, Rep Lowen was first.
Okay.
I'll go ahead just to get us moving. I'm wondering, with the both the collection of data, the assessment, and services being offered, if the civilian and non-civilian communities are sort of getting equal treatment, everybody affected.
Representative, who would you like to address that to?
I'm not sure who's the I guess, yeah, whoever wants to chime in.
Hi, this is Dr. Espiritu. I'll take that question. So from the beginning of this incident and until recently, we haven't gotten any requests for care from the non-military beneficiaries. And in fact, clinicians taking care of civilian beneficiaries have had access to the same resource that I've had, which is primarily the state toxicologist with the Department of Health.
Has there been an effort, like are the affected citizens and from affected communities and caregivers kind of aware of the resources available? Has there been an effort to communicate?
Ma'am, are you asking me whether civilian clinicians are aware of the resources available to them, like the State Department of Health and the
Or
poison
clinicians
control?
that would treat the civilian communities if that's somehow different from you?
Ma'am, as I said, clinicians treating non-military beneficiaries have access to the State Department of Health and also the poison control line. I'm not a clinician who's licensed in Hawaii, so I'm not aware of what specific resources they're made aware. They are privy to.
Hi, Riplo, and this is Dr. Diana Felton, the state toxicologist with the Department of Health. I can answer that question a little bit. We've done some significant outreach to providers locally, and I speak to a number of them regularly, those that are taking care of patients in the affected area. Also have spent time assisting clinicians from across the country who have called with questions for affected people that have since relocated to different areas of the mainland. So we've definitely tried hard. We've put out some medical advisories for providers and done other things to try to assist civilian providers. To answer your question about the data collection with the health assessments, a lot of effort was put into making sure that civilians were aware of the CDC's health assessment surveys. And a lot of outreach went out to making sure that the civilian communities were included, and there is the ability to differentiate the data to look specifically at civilian communities versus military affiliated populations. We did get significantly larger responses from military affiliated individuals, but there were civilian participants as well. I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you. That helps answer it. And I guess I just want to put on the radar that we want to continue to remember and I guess remind the military members here that there are affected, people affected by this crisis that are civilians that also deserve the same resources and treatment.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Mike.
Yes, thank you. I've got to take off for another meeting, but I just wanted to make a comment. And I think that Ernie kind of summed it up very well. Ernie Lau summed it up earlier when he said all hands on deck. And that this really is a kako thing, as we say here locally, that our session, legislative session begins on January 18th. And I know that Rep. Lowen and myself as the respective chairs for the Environment Committee, we will do all that we can to assist in any way that we can. So thank you all for your engagement. Mahalo.
Thank you, Senator. Melanie.
Thank you. Dr. Espiritu, talking as doctor to doctor here. I am a community physician. I know I've had some patients come in and tell me their symptoms. I didn't realize that the water was contaminated at the time. I kind of look back on it now and I know I had people with GI upset and respiratory things, but it didn't click until after the contamination was known. So, and in terms of reaching out to our community, I really don't feel like I'm being supported to even report this or even know where to go. I've also had, other physicians say that they've taken care of patients and then now the reimbursement portion of it is not happening. So, that's going to limit our ability to care for patients as well outside of the military system. I have a question on what you mean by Hawaii market. Is that all of Hawaii, like people are asking the civilians as well as military members, or are you just talking about military members being able to access the Hawaii market / Makalapa clinic?
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry I was unclear. So within the Defense Health Agency here in Hawaii, there are 3 levels of authority, direction, and control. So there's the Defense Health Agency region Indo-Pacific, which takes care of the larger region. There's the Hawaii market, which is has administrative control for the military treatment facilities on Oahu, and then each service has their own military treatment facility. So when I refer to the Hawaii market, I'm specifically talking about Tripler Army Medical Center, the 15th Med Group, and Navy Medical Readiness and Training Command, Pearl Harbor, which was previously known as Makalapa. And there's also Desmond Oz, which is up at Schofield Barracks. Is that more clear?
So I guess reading between the lines there, that means that the civilians are not going to be able to get care at these facilities. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. At this point, that is correct. That was not something that has been requested during the acute and intermediate phase of this incident.
Who would need to request that of you?
It wouldn't be requested of me. I believe it would take place at someplace in DC, so at a higher level than what takes place at the DHAR Indo-Pacific.
So would that be the ATSDR people?
No, ma'am, they do not render medical care.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you're sensing our sense of frustration here. As care providers, we would like to give care to the affected civilians, as well as people who, quite frankly, did not trust the Department of Defense and decided to come off base and come to see us. So how do we get reimbursed for payment, and how do we even get educated? Because most of the time, the information that came out was, well, this is all uncharted territory. We don't know anything about it. Nobody's going to voluntarily expose us to these agents. Therefore, it's all observational data, which we have very little of. So I don't know what to do for them. You know, I mean, I need some help here.
Yes, ma'am, and I do sense that frustration. I work quite closely with my colleagues outside of the military health system. And please believe me when I say that the trauma from this unprecedented event understandably continues to be a top concern in our community. And any ongoing health symptoms should be investigated and understood. I absolutely understand that. We're working within the interagency and community partners such as the Hawaii Department of Health to better understand any ongoing symptoms potentially related to exposure. But to date, no evidence-based explanation has been identified to account for these ongoing symptoms. So what we are asking for is that having a clear overall picture will allow us to take additional actions to provide support. But in order to do that, in terms of the military population, we need those people to come back to the Hawaii market and come to the clinic, which we are establishing, so we can record and document their exposures and their symptoms. For non-military beneficiaries, they'll continue to see their civilian clinicians out in the network, or so the non-military healthcare system, and report their symptoms to the Hawaii Department of Health and rely on resources such as Dr. Felton.
Can I just see if the Department of Health might want to provide some answers or counsel over to Melanie on the question she's asking about securing medical support for civilians? Dr. Felton, that may not be in your purview, but anybody from DOH?
Go ahead, Joanna. Okay, thanks. We definitely, appreciate the comments, and, we have been and continue to be available to support the community in any way that we can. We've been supporting, DHA and the military health services as best as we're able. And we continue to be available to provide support to providers and the public.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead, Melanie, and then we're going to go on to Ernie and others.
Okay. Well, then one is a comment is that for the ATSDR, your response rate to your survey was rather low when you think about it. And I think some of it was fear from the military personnel of retaliation, or also being labeled as difficult and making the service members' lives more difficult. And when you think about it, reporting to you is like ratting out your employer. So that doesn't work very well for making people feel safe. And the rapid response number that I forget which of you said, Navy officer said, I have seen lots of comments in the chat as well as on social media and just from my patients that have told me that they don't answer. The numbers change, they don't get a response. When they do come out, it's a perfunctory examination. They don't get feedback on samples that were taken. I don't know, I'm just taking this is hearsay, I guess you could say, but that would be another place to improve the optics. But I just want to point out that some people are just too afraid, to report all of this as well.
Thank you, Melanie. Ernie, I'm going to go to you unless there's somebody else in line ahead of you, which I can't see.
There's Ashley, I think was ahead of me.
Okay, good. Ashley, I don't see you. There you go. There you are.
Okay.
Hi, Ashley.
All right. Will the Navy support the appropriation of funds to establish an independent testing laboratory in the state of Hawaii to enable both local agencies and UH as well as the Navy to test water samples immediately without having to wait weeks for testing to be conducted on the West Coast?
I think that's over to.
Yeah, so this is Captain Gertzma here. So right now we're underway of establishing that laboratory. I do not have the data associated with to the extent to how broad it is, and then also how it's applied across the global community. I don't know if those parameters have been defined yet, but what we have done is started to partner with U of H. The lab equipment's on island, and now we're working through. There's a startup process, certified lab techs. Making sure you understand the protocols and establish the standard operating procedures. So, in the future, we'll have that next update, but the goal is to be able to get a lab here and at some point have it certified on island, and DOH is going to help, with that shaping to get to that point. So we don't have to follow, but right now we have it initially, it was 21 days. Turnaround 21 to 30 days. We have it down now to about 5 to 7 days by working with those EPA certified labs on mainland. So over to you.
Oh, okay. When can we expect an update on how that's coming along?
I'll put it down as an action item. I don't know. I'm gonna have to get with the University of Hawaii and get back to you on that. I don't have a timeline other than it is important.
Okay, and can that update be released to the public, and where can we find it?
I think what we'll end up doing is, I think it's a good news story. How to what extent it's defined and what's released, but regardless, what we'll do is we'll figure out a way to communicate that to a much broader audience and highlight some of those things that we're doing.